Hello.
Hi,
Hi,
everybody.
everybody. Welcome to Time Theft Tonight.
Mayo.
Yes.
Mayo. Oh, yes. Show that off. Show that off. Let's just get that right out of the way.
That
The
shirts.
the elephant in the room.
The dick in the room.
Yeah, that
I'm
that
still.
elephant trunk in the room.
Is that
Uh,
from the Jackbox stream that I was unable to make it to?
Oh yeah, I was
yes.
wondering, were you there? Were you there for? I couldn't remember. Yeah, that's a
I
shame.
was
Yeah,
not because I
no, it
was
had a
I was
conflict.
laid up. I was in North Carolina with family, and I got a mystery
That's right.
virus that was not COVID, and I was just suffering.
Yep.
Can you model that for us a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, this is yeah, everyone. This
It's
is from the
right on.
Jackbox
The tits are
stream.
right on my tits, which is really
So
good.
good.
I have to
Yeah.
not touch my tits because that'll be bad. Already add to the badness of the Twitch
Yeah, nobody.
police.
This is totally allowed. I can't remember who drew. Do we remember who drew this
I
beautiful
drew it.
art?
Yes.
Oh my god. Oh
I think
yay.
it was
Oh.
Megan who made this shirt. Am I wrong about that? I think it was Megan who combined them, but I don't know who wrote the
Mayo.
yeah, who wrote the Mayo.
I don't remember either, but
Multiple
the real
other
heads will know.
multiple other people in are at least one other person bought a shirt in the Piscord, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from that Jackbox stream. So that's amazing. There were a lot of good contenders in there, but that one really did come out great. Looks fucking incredible.
Real mayonnaise heads. But anyway,
Yeah.
hello, Callisto.
Oh,
Welcome.
geez, that's me. Hi.
Welcome to this side of the show.
It's look at me. I've broken out of the chat. I've breached
Yes.
containment.
Yes. Callisto's broken containment. So those of you probably people who watch this, especially on Twitch, will recognize Callisto's handle from modding and also from being very active on the Piscord. And Callisto and I have been friends now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
being
modding the chat. Yeah.
Yes.
I was the one who spearheaded the creation of the Piscord.
Yes.
We were
yes.
both scared.
Callisto made the Discord.
we were both scared, and we're like, we can't do this unless we have somebody
and
else
it's evil
on the team.
It's wrong. It's wrong to do. And yeah, Callisto did all the groundwork and is honestly, I would say, the most consistent in checking. A lot of times when something's needed to be done or added or whatever, sometimes I'll be asleep for 5 days and not check notifications. And
yeah.
I'm shackled to this awful little prison of a multi-platform app.
Yeah.
Discord, the everything app.
Yes.
So yeah, tell us about yourself and your wonderful little robot body. It's really
absolutely
good.
Yeah. So, this has an interesting story to it. So hello everyone in the chat. My name is Callisto. I am around, I guess. I don't really do much online. I used to Twitch stream a bit, and this is actually part of what this little form is from. I started Twitch streaming. I was streaming Pokemon for a while. I did some Kerbal Space Program, but then I got a job where I'm talking 5 days a week, and my voice was just like, I can't do that anymore. So I have taken a pause from streaming, but I wanted to be a VTuber, a PNG tuber, whatever we want to call it. I'm the slightly shittier version of that. I'm a JPEG tuber.
Yes, that's perfect for here. Give us that crunchy.
Yeah,
absolutely. I need like a crunchy GIF version of this where I'm 20 pixels wide.
I can try and remember how I did, because that's how the image of us, the groomer image. I think I maybe just did that in MS Paint. Is I made it look a little crunchier. So you gotta.
I might be able to do that.
If
you want some spare assets, I might be able to do that to a picture of Ringo or something. We're getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, so I am here. This stream idea was birthed during a previous on-stream discussion, if I remember correctly, about overlaps between plurality and being transgender, and specifically being furry and being otherkin or therian. And I was like, I kind of know things about that from lived experience. So yeah, here I am.
And thank you for coming on and talking about those things.
Absolutely. And also, entirely just by the power of my own autism, a good chunk of this stream is also going to be looking at a New Yorker article from, is it 27? Yeah, New Yorker article from 2017 about Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, which is my number one autistic love. And just, it's an awful article, and I'm going to be tearing it to shreds.
Oh boy. So there's a lot of misconceptions about within or regarding the Thomas the Tank Engine fandom, would you say?
Oh, absolutely, yes. 1000%. It's one of the classic shows that pops up in those like your childhood is darker than you think things that you see.
Lord.
And this article is just that with a degree, it feels like.
Yes. I'm excited to see that torn to shreds. And Gia Talentino is also the person who was like on Twitter, like, well, sure, my parents had a sex trafficking ring, but posting about that makes me sad, you know.
Fucking what?
Uh,
I did not know about this.
Oh yeah. This was a couple years ago, but it's still during the pandemic on Twitter. Yeah, her parents have trafficked a lot of people, and
Oof.
saying anything about that hurt her feelings. She's a feminist on Twitter.
Oh my God.
So,
Absolutely wild. Well, that colors my opinion a little bit. Anyways.
Yeah, you can feel better for ripping the article to shreds. Oh,
yeah.
Also,
good to know.
Thank you for resubscribing Crave. And also, before we started, Eternity Box.
Eternity Box, yeah. Thank you so much. It's 5-month subscription and 9 months. Wow, y'all are in deep.
Yes.
Thank you for the support.
So yeah, where do we do okay, this is really random, but I was recently realizing that I had a childhood train fixation, which is a weird thing. Not weird that I had it, but weird that I've never talked about it on here because it's somehow never come up. But yeah, I wore the VHSs out on specifically like train documentaries. Like
was it, let me guess a specific one. Was it lots and lots of trains?
Okay, maybe. I don't know. I actually recently received a big box of VHS, and I should go through that and see if it's in there because
you absolutely should.
I've heard of this one because there was a bunch of lots and lots of.
Yeah, it was like a whole series. I specifically remember because there was a commercial for it on a VHS that I had of probably Thomas, let's be real. And I would watch that commercial repeatedly.
Oh.
And somehow my parents never got me tested.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, let's check this out. Oh.
Oh my God.
Oh, is that the full show?
Is it? Holy shit, it is!
Wow.
You're telling me I can watch my childhood white whale on YouTube?
Should we just watch this?
Nah, I've got a beef with a New Yorker staff writer.
That's way more important. Literally, actually.
Oh. Is the sound off on purpose?
No, can you hear it? It was just...
No, I can't hear it for whatever reason. Well, there's the Metra in Chicago. It's just okay.
Hell yeah, brother. It sure is. It sure exists.
If you I will say Aurora for some reason.
I will say the Metra electric line has pretty good headway compared to the rest of it. Yes, Metra, which is the one that I used to use to commute into the city. Is all electrified, and it has usually half-hour headways during busier times and 1-hour headways on off times, which is not bad for Metro.
Wow, I'm surprised. I mean, good for us.
Can y'all hear it now, guests?
No. Oh man, that one was rolling coal.
Truly.
Business. Yeah, I mean, this is not a bad... Oh, now I can hear myself. Ooh.
Now you can hear yourself.
Too much Devin.
Yeah. So I was immediately like, I hate that.
Why we can't hear? Why y'all can't hear it?
I think we're good at this point. I will be watching that later.
Yes. Okay.
Just
so
have it. That is like playing in the corner of my mind at all times, basically.
I don't think it was this, but I'd probably have to watch the whole thing to remember. I have such like vague memories of it. I just remember that it was like, it wasn't just videos of trains, like it was about train, like it talked about them. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, this looks like from the description, loved by children, rail fans of all ages is exactly what it says. Lots of different kinds of big trains and actions rolling down the tracks with lots of music and train sounds. So what I remember watching was like, it was almost like God, I'm trying to think, like, what were those that fucking PBS thing where it was like do 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 fucking the in oh man, I feel like we've even talked about it on here, but like it wasn't a documentary exactly, but they talked about trains and like what trains were used for and like how they worked and stuff like that. So it wasn't just videos of trains.
I don't recall that.
But anyway, Tears. It's not It's not from Tears Zoo. I think that's a different thing. But that anyway. So yeah, that is a random thing that I guess I don't have a point to that anecdote. Just a thing that I feel important for this audience to know is that I had a very a fixation like that, and I think I watched Thomas the Tank Engine, but I remember more The Little Engine That Could. I remember watching more.
There was a show of that? I just
no.
There was definitely a movie.
Yeah, the movie. Yeah, I remember watching those a ton, and it's like, and what I got out of that is like, oh, no wonder I liked like mechs and machines later.
Yeah, a train is just a mech it's a snake mech rather than
it's
a
hot take there.
Yeah.
All right, so if we're starting with the trains, I do have like some proper context written out that I can give the people who may not have grown up with Thomas being around as a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for historical context, you can pull up the first image at your leisure of our fine benevolent god Ringo. There he is.
I love that. Look at it. He's got that little sassy earring.
Yes,
going. This is it.
That's okay. Hi, Ringo.
Oh wow, we are inside of Ringo now.
Oh, I don't like it.
His hair is all slick back, and like,
oh, God.
it makes me feel emotions to see that the trains are so small.
Yes, they are. They're relatively decently sized for model trains. If you see most model train stuff in the US and the UK is going to be significantly smaller than that. But essentially, reason I have this image.
I was going to say that they were bigger than I would have. I don't know what I was imagining, but when I first saw this image, I was definitely like, oh, those are big. Like, those are like you can really get your hands around those.
Mitts. You can beat someone to death with those things.
I don't like your phrasing, but you could really grip and squeeze them. Anyways,
you can really go,
essentially
get them in and out of a tunnel.
Oh no! Oh, geez, we'll get to that. There's tunnels related in this. So, for context, the universe of Thomas the Tank Engine began in 1942 and sort of before that with stories and rhymes told by this guy called the Reverend Wilbert Awdry to his son Christopher, who at one point was sick at home with the measles. Reverend Awdry was an Anglican minister in the UK in the olden days. And then these little stories and rhymes and whatever formed the basis of a series of children's books entitled the Railway Series, which spanned 26 books from 1945 until 1972, and then 16 additional books written by Christopher himself from 1983 to 2011. Reverend Awdry passed away in 1997. And in the early 1980s, after many failed attempts over the years, including, this is not a joke, a live like model train adaptation on the BBC in the 50s that failed spectacularly, In the 80s, British television producer Britt Allcroft was finally able to obtain the rights to adapt the Reverend Audrey's stories into a TV series, which became Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, often better known as its abbreviated title, Thomas and Friends.
So wait,
it started airing.
That initial one, was that, you said live act? So do you mean like?
So it was model trains on a layout. They were filming model, like just off the shelf model engines. It was live filmed. So they literally had a television camera, like live studio audience type. I don't know if they actually had an audience. But
instead of like a stop motion animation.
Instead of like animation or pre-recorded, like they were doing it live on camera. And that led to like one of the trains derailed, and then a big hand had to come in and pick it up and fix it. And it was so awful that the Reverend Audrey was just like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never adapting my stories to television.
That sounds so good. Are there clips of this online? Do you know?
There is not. It is completely lost media. Also lost media is Andrew Lloyd Webber proposed an animated adaptation musical of it to the Reverend, and he turned it down. Yeah, there's videos about Thomas Lost Media out there. It's a whole thing. But yeah, so Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends.
Oh my God, sorry.
I know, like thinking about people that are into cats, also being into like his train thing. Like I can't. My brain is exploding.
I mean, Starlight Express was inspired by Thomas.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but so the show started in 1984 and technically ran until 2021. But for our purposes here, the quote-unquote classic series ended sometime between 1998 to 2002, depending on who you ask. The early seasons were narrated by, in the UK, former Beatle Ringo Starr, who we were briefly seeing on our screens there for a moment.
There he is.
We have Ringo for scale with the stars of the show, so to speak.
Why's he got an American flag on? Also, I'm just noticing.
That is a good question, because the show was filmed. It was filmed in the UK at the time. It was filmed at Shepperton Studios in England. I don't know, Ringo. Why are you?
Interesting.
Yeah,
I just want to say I gotta use pictures in the photo viewer more, because this is really good technology.
Yeah, this is really good. Again, we're upping our public access TV vibes, being able to actually Callisto can just narrate, and you can, like, in a cheap documentary, just slowly pan
that's true
over the image.
Good point. Yeah, I love it. Like a stolen documentary video on a YouTuber's channel.
Yes. But anyway, please continue. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So until 2008, Thomas and Friends was filmed using these, as we're seeing, decently large custom-built model trains with moving eye mechanisms, replaceable face plates, so they could like show multiple expressions. They could switch them out. It was all done on massive, like, studio-scale sets at originally Shepperton Studios in England, depicting the Northwestern Railway, the fictional setting on the island of Sodor, a fictional island off the coast of the English Midlands between the mainland and the Isle of Man. If it hasn't become clear by that sentence alone, by the way, let me state outright that Reverend Audrey put some damn near Tolkien-level world building into this stuff. He mapped out the railway, the history, the linguistics, the geography of this whole fictional island. He intricately mapped all of the railways his stories were set on. He drew abundant inspiration throughout from real locations, real history, and real railways across Great Britain. The island of Sodor is, in effect, a reflection of the real world and was written as if it could exist within it, albeit with talking trains. You can pull up the second image whenever you want, of just showing like the scale of the sets. And this was season 1. So this was like early days when they had a dirt cheap budget and they still had this massive set.
That's so fucking cool.
God, this seems so fucking fun to work on.
Yeah. And so it really genuinely looks like it. We'll get to, there's been some people who have gone back and basically recreated some of the conditions of filming for this and filmed their own stuff. There was like a big project a couple of years ago. I'm getting ahead of myself. So there's a pretty big fandom around Thomas and Friends from people who were nostalgic for it, having grown up with it. Autistic adults like myself. Not everyone in the fandom's autistic, but definitely a good chunk.
Certainly helps.
It definitely helps. It comes with the territory.
I have to imagine that the man himself. I mean, that sound. I'm getting a pretty distinct
1,000%. Yes, absolutely.
Vibe.
Yeah, I made a fake country for my train people.
My train OCs. Like,
yeah,
you don't have to be autistic to do that, but it helps.
He was also an avid railway modeler, and like his whole thing with writing these, the reason Thomas honestly did so well is that he wrote them in a way that like the kids could appreciate, but the parents reading the books to their kids could also appreciate as well. The show kind of ran with that ethos in a really good way. So it's also really well film made as well. It's one of the main people behind some of the early seasons was David Mitton, who had credits from Thunderbirds and like did all sorts of like was really good with practical modeling and practical effects. It was well directed and well shot. And honestly, I would call it art in a way. So getting into this article, if we can call it that, from the New York Times. Gia Tolentino, what are you doing?
So when did you encounter this, Callisto? Did you encounter this when it came out?
This particular article predates my own active participation in the online fandom for Thomas. I kind of got into it really over the pandemic. I went back to my comfort show, as it were, and rewatched all of it because at the time it was all on YouTube. Some of it has since been deleted, but some of it's still there, and it's on my computer. Don't tell Mattel.
Good. We're pro that here.
Very pro fucking over Mattel.
So
okay, my introduction to this was actually a Tumblr post that I think I saw years and years ago before that, and so I'm wondering, do you if in my recollection, I feel like I heard about this because this is I feel like I heard about this idea before 2017. I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, no, this is regurgitating a conversation that has been happening online since the beginning of time. I mean, it's so fundamental. Like you'll see things online, children's media, people go, but what if it was dark? What if SpongeBob's in a coma or like shit like that? That's been happening on like forums and wherever else since the internet started. And as you'll come to see, there is quite literally references to Tumblr posts throughout this article when she runs out of her own ideas.
That makes sense. I definitely have to admit, I believe this for sure. I think you actually told. I feel like we had a conversation like on the other Discord that we're in, and you talked about this, and
I probably did at some point. I'll have to go digging and find it. I probably like yelled at you for believing it.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's what happened. Is that we were in a call like when we watched a movie or something, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's actually super fascist," and you're like, "No," and I was like,
"You were like, wait a second,
I believe you.
I mean,
I believe you more than the Tumblr post. I'll take that into my worldview."
I would have been inclined to. I had missed this whole discourse level, even though again I've seen things of this genre about other media a lot. But if I had encountered it, I'm sure I would have believed it because I always want to feel like superior. And that's part of the appeal of some of these articles, right? Is telling people, oh, the thing that other people like, or this thing that you've never thought of, it's actually really nefarious and dark, and now you're in on it.
So I mean, this article's title alone sets the stage for the repressive authoritarian soul of Thomas the Tank Engine. It's such a headline that you would see to draw people in. The underlining of the main image describing Wilbur Awdry as disliking change, venerating order, and craving the administration of punishment is just so.
That's autism.
That's autism, and also just kind of untrue in how he writes the books. So Gia Tolentino's thesis here is a dressed up version of those clickbait "your childhood was darker than you think" articles. She first brings up the one that everybody brings up, the story known in the UK and in the original books as The Sad Story of Henry. So in this story, the titular locomotive Henry the Green Engine hides in a tunnel because he's worried that the rain will ruin his paint. It's admittedly like a silly and selfish thing to do. He refuses to move despite having a trainload of passengers behind him. And the guy who runs the railway, Sir Topham Hatt, basically goes, all right, fine, you made your bed, now sleep in it, and takes the train away and bricks Henry up in the tunnel.
Now I remember, this is the one Thomas the Tank Engine episode that is emblazoned on my mind. This
fucking course it is. That's the problem, is everyone thinks it's that kind of situation.
Right.
So, my dear friend Luna, wonderful, delightful woman, very autistic, and I say this in the most loving way possible, and very into Thomas, more so than myself, put it best when I consulted her about this. The engines are personified machines first, characters second, and allegory last. Henry being left in the tunnel here is the train equivalent of a parent sending their child to bed without dinner after they've thrown a tantrum over eating their vegetables. The moral of the story is basically don't inconvenience others for your own vanity. In the article, Gia Tolentino also falls victim to the oldest and most debunked lie about this story, claiming that Henry's just left in the tunnel and that he is entombed there to die until the end of time, which is not true. They fucking let him out in the next story, in the next episode.
Yeah, that's
the
thing that I remember about this whole discussion is like basically this, and finding out that like, oh no, they just let him, because from the story I remember they like turned him into a.
You're mixing that up with another character, and
okay.
we'll get to him.
Okay, thank you. All right, so there's this is and I wonder if
it's very classically the one that a lot of people tend to remember this one because of how dark the ending seems to be. But yeah, in the very next episode, they let him out. In the Gia notes that like in the US version, the voiceover is tweaked so that Henry's fate seems temporary. That you're blatantly lying here. It is temporary. If you had watched the episodes instead of just reading a couple Tumblr posts for this quote unquote article, then you would know that. Anyway, moving on. Her other example of a death sentence, quote unquote, in this article is that character that you mentioned earlier, who in the show is called Smudger, in the books is called Stanley. He rides roughly, doesn't care about making messes or shit like that, and ignores advice from the sort of grandfatherly older character who tells him like, hey, get your shit together or they're going to be mad at you. And eventually the railway manager's like, all right, I'm going to make this engine useful finally, and turns him into a stationary pumping engine. They take his wheels off and stick him behind the shed to be a pumping engine. And this is admittedly a little dark if we think of the trains as people, but again, they're machines, not people. Fans of the show do acknowledge it's a little much, but I mean, it's if we could get into it, in the books, the character's an American engine, and that type of engine did ride roughly on British rails because of gauging issues. It's a whole thing. It's one of the darker ones, but it's an isolated sort of thing there.
Yeah, I mean, you can have isolated things that are dark without the whole show being.
Yeah, he's
fascist.
also pretty heavily implied to still be alive. He's not dead. He's just there. He's just kind of chilling.
Photopotamus asked in the chat, is Fat Controller used derogatorily?
That is a good question. So that is a good question. The character who runs the main railway that we see mostly in the railway series is his government name is Sir Topham Hatt. There's actually several of them. It's a family of dudes who all have the title of Sir Topham Hatt. But they as a group are called the Fat Controller. In the UK, it's sort of an endearing thing. And there's other characters. There's the Thin Controller, the Tall Controller, the Small Controller. Like, there's various other characters. It's not like a derogatory thing. But in the US dub of the show, they did only ever call him Sir Topham Hatt.
Yeah, okay. Because I did not remember that title. I always remember just Sir Topham Hatt. So that clears that up.
Yeah, it's in the US, they intentionally sort of obfuscated that because the optics of it would have looked bad in the US in the 80s and 90s, they figured. So Tolentino overall just describes this show as having, again, quote, a repressive authoritarian soul, and states in that image subtitle about Audrey disliking change, venerating order, administration of punishment. She's trying to sort of position him as some mean-spirited old minister when really he's not. He's just kind of a dude. He was a passionate train enthusiast, incredibly so, to the point that he helped literally invent and popularize the practice of preserving steam locomotives in the United Kingdom. His stories are a love letter to the railways, informed by his own life growing up around steam engines and working with them as a volunteer on a railway in Wales in the 50s and 60s, again, in that early era of preservation. The railway series stories have moral lessons in them for children about listening to your parents, not being selfish, so on and so forth. And some of them can be a bit like simplistic by modern standards, but they're not unfair or cruel by any means. Tolentino also just takes to straight up lying about the morals of stories and the points of certain characters throughout this article. As she mentions, so there's a character, you're going to laugh at his name. He's called Bulgy. He is a bus. He's a double-decker bus. He shows up in season 3 of the show and in some of the later books. And she sort of positioned this article author positions Bulgy as some sort of revolutionary freedom fighter. she like specifically brings up the phrase "scarlet deceiver" that is used to describe him, and that's actually a reference to the fact that he's a double-decker bus. He's painted red, fucking whatever. She seems to be implying there's some kind of communism allegory here, which there's not. Bulgy's character is fundamentally a liar. He shows up, he pretends to be a railway bus, and karma gets him when he tries to take a shortcut and gets stuck under a bridge. And that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Generally, again, quoting my friend,
saying somebody's like a communism allegory because they're red is a lot.
Yeah, makes me insane.
It feels like, I mean, if there's some other thing there and they're also red, I'd be like, yeah, I can see how there is some like
yeah. Cybernetics Thesaurus also says in the chat that I did want to point out. Fun fact, in the first two books, he was known as the Fat Director, and then the railways got nationalized, and he became the Fat Controller in the third book. I don't know if it's specifically nationalization, because I think that comes later down the timeline, but he does get a promotion, basically.
It really just does seem like on a level that plenty of staff writers have done at this point, but Tolentino is just pulling shit out of her ass. Like a character being treated poorly is not fascism. That doesn't reflect any kind of political
Yes, absolutely.
worldview. Is it just she just have some idea of like, oh well, the fascists in Italy made the trains run on time, and so if you're obsessed with train efficiency, you must be fascist.
She does not make that. She does not draw that
like
conclusion in the article in particular. But I feel like if you asked her about it, she probably would say that. Again, quoting my friend Luna here, by far most of the lessons in the stories are about natural consequences and karma. Very little has anything to do with punishments from the Fat Controller himself, except maybe early on. Tolentino again lies about the story purpose of one of the sort of main antagonists that we see in the troublesome trucks, which are another thing people tend to remember about Thomas. Freight cars, as we know them in the US. She describes them as, quote, being disciplined into fearful obedience through public symbolic punishments. No. Literally any toddler who's watched more than 3 episodes of the show can tell you that the troublesome trucks are not victims, they're villains. They are there to represent a force of chaos. They're routinely trying to cause accidents, push engines off the rails, or literally downright kill themselves just for fun. Basically, they're there to represent the very real danger of railways and like working in an industrial setting. The force of entropy, I guess. And worst of all, Tolentino tries to position one of the show's main antagonists as a sympathetic character. She claims that the island of Sodar has a, quote, caste system, and that diesel engines are oppressed. This dovetails weirdly nicely with your recent article about transmisandry. Fucking to quote her here,
comes back.
Yeah, it all comes back to it. To quote her here, there is one diesel engine, a black train known just as Diesel, who struggles to prove that he's useful as the steam trains. Gia, listen to me. You're lying. Diesel doesn't struggle to prove he's useful. He's the train equivalent of a white supremacist. He shows up on the railway claiming that diesel engines like himself are, quote, revolutionary and know everything. And when a steam engine, Duck, who's kind of a narrative foil to Diesel, I can get into that if you want, but it's a whole rabbit hole. Duck plays a trick on him and shows him he's not such a smart guy after all. Diesel responds by starting rumors about Duck, lying about him, and getting him eventually sent away after his friends turn on him. He gaslights everyone into hating this beloved character. Yeah, so for some real-world historical context here, the book Diesel appears in, Duck and the Diesel Engine, came out in 1958. During this time in Great Britain, the railways were undergoing some pretty seismic changes. In 1955, the British Railways Modernization Plan was published, which encouraged a rapid changeover in technology from steam to diesel traction, and ultimately resulted in hundreds upon hundreds of perfectly functional steam engines being disposed of by the end of the 60s, long before their operational lives could have ended. Wilbur Awdry was, as mentioned, pretty passionate about steam trains and critical of the modernization plan, which, in hindsight, he was kind of right. It kind of sucked in a lot of ways and could have been better. And this is pretty heavily reflected in his writing here. Diesel is allegorical for the thinking in Britain at the time, that diesel traction was supposed to be revolutionary, but that it ultimately came with its own hurdles and was kind of just the same shit. Awdry actually later went on to introduce more sympathetic and well-rounded diesel characters in the series later down the line once things panned out, and many of his other stories would deal in some way with British Railways' botched modernization effort. There's a deeper analysis sort of there about what like the point of heavy industry and the use of technology. I don't know.
It's
So
more. I'm reminded again of Tolkien. Like there's.
oh yeah,
You're making a linguistic point, or like in this case, a industry point. That's
Well,
like,
he was also very like that's kind of what Lord of the Rings is all about. Is about like industrialization and all that stuff
yeah.
too.
It's
So
also about war and like World War I.
right, right.
Yeah, absolutely. Tolentino also tries to add like this weird kind of gender dynamic thing, talking about the fact that that most of the main cast is all pretty much male. The only female characters we really see in terms of actual like trained stuff are all coaches, like Thomas the Tank Engine's two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, that we famously see him with in pretty much every piece of media he shows up in, like the very famous windmill intro there on screen. I don't love that she goes into this, but fails to mention that in literally as soon as some of the early books and as soon as season 2 and 3 of the show, we meet two female locomotive characters and later get some more down the line. At this point in the article, Tolentino kind of drops all pretense of original writing and just starts quoting Tumblr threads about Thomas supposedly existing in a train post-apocalypse and claiming that Sir Topham Hatt maintains authoritarian rule through disinformation. She's just blatantly lying here about everything. No, those Tumblr threads are referring to again the British modernization plan and the mass scrapping of steam locomotives. That is mentioned in one of the books about how like, oh, the island of Sodor is the only place this isn't happening. Basically, Reverend Audrey created the island of Sodor as a sort of steam preservationist dream where steam locomotives were kept in mainline service instead of just being sort of sequestered away on heritage railways. Overall, just this article is badly written, badly researched, and at times downright factually incorrect. It's a pile of clickbait, and it does a disservice to the passion that Reverend Audrey, his son Christopher, and the thousands of genuine and passionate people behind the scenes and Thomas fans have put towards this wonderful fictional world on the island of Sodor. And I realized recently this article is written by Gian Tolentino, who also wrote an article that I really liked from the New Yorker about Shenyang. She went and she saw it twice and sort of analyzed the cult behind it and stuff like that. As we've heard earlier on, she's an interesting person, shall we say?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
So that's my rant.
So this idea in Thomas the Tank Engine that like that the characters, they're not characters, the trains are not character people, first, is kind of blowing my mind because just having watched it as like a baby child who was just going to empathize with them on the most like basic emotional level of like, oh, if I were bricked up I would be sad, or like, oh, I don't want to follow the rules, I want to do crazy shit, so of course I don't want to have consequences for my actions. The idea that it actually is supposed to be this kind of deeper message about like industrial safety and the consequences of your actions on other people within like an intricate system is really interesting to wrap.
It's interesting because there are levels to it, because you do have that baseline. The kids can relate to the characters and the slapstick comedy at times and the just sort of stuff going on, basic things that would be in the illustration, so to speak. But then the adults reading it might sort of, in theory, get something out of more like, hey, what does this mean in terms of the world or whatever? And that becomes more, especially as the book stories go on, Audrey gets a little more into that. He starts introducing these more real world themes, and the show kind of mirrors that because it adapted the books really from the start and moved on from there, and it ended up kind of going its own direction when it ran out of stories to adapt. But yeah, it's interesting, and there's a really good quote somewhere from Audrey that I neglected to put into my notes, essentially saying that like you have to write these books not just for the kids with the slapstick funny bits and things they'll enjoy, but for the poor parents who have to read it time and again and again and again and again with intelligent, funny like jokes and things that they'll understand and kind of enjoy.
I mean, and it does seem like a very like British culture, to the extent that I know, certainly as somebody looking at it from the outside, kind of approach of like just there are a lot of like powerful institutions and like a sense of like positioning and like knowing how different systems work and interlock within each other within British like culture. So it does seem like, but that's not fascist, right? Like it's not.
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
definitely.
We could certainly.
It's
You know,
there's this idea. I think a better analysis of it that comes from a similar angle to begin with as this article, but comes around to it in a nice way. Is if anyone knows the YouTuber Tomska, the guy who made Asdif movie, he did an analysis on his own channel talking about like he grew up with the show and has vague memories of it. Let's actually look at it. And I mean, it's the morals of it are by no means perfect. It was still written by an Anglican minister in the 1940s through 70s, right. So it's got some stuff in there. There's an arc that's kind of vaguely anti-union, actually.
Yeah, that does try.
Essentially, at one point, the larger engines are made to shunt their own trains, and they complain and go on strike. They don't want to shunt their own trains, and so Sir Topham Hatt has to bring in an engine as a strike breaker. He literally has to buy another engine and punish the three that don't want to shunt their own trains by just leaving them in the shed while other engines do their work. Yeah, fascinating stuff. Thomas the Tank Engine is canonically a scab, everybody.
God.
Oh no.
So it's not perfect, but
Thomas
again, we also
yeah,
we do also have to remember that this was in a period when historically massive rail strikes had rocked the United Kingdom over the course of the Reverend's life. So he was reflecting that in his writing. It was becoming sort of allegorical for that. Again, speaking as a very pro-union person, I don't love the message of those ones, but it's interesting as a historical piece.
Right. Yeah, and it definitely, I do think it's damaging to, like, at this specific thing, I think is interesting on a little bit wider scale of an, like, out, like, even zooming out outside of this specific instance of, like, almost fandom assassination, right? Like, because I really do, like, this is the thing I knew about Thomas the Tank Engine. Like, this is the I mean, and I don't think I was alone. I'm alone in that. Is that it was very much like that was what I knew about it, was that it was fascist. And so when you write stuff like this, it really can become the kind of knee-jerk understanding of a piece of media. And if you don't do your research and you just write based on a bunch of Tumblr posts, you can be extremely wrong. And
and I mean, it's
right.
It's sort of the morals of this show. The stuff behind it is fascist in that, I mean, capitalistic Western culture is fascist. It's doesn't really go beyond that necessarily, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think there's damage in kind of conflating those things. Like Blush Tiger said in the chat, like it reflects the patriarchal authoritarian culture of the time.
Right.
But it does just seem so like American liberal to see, like,
oh yeah,
to equate that with fascism, especially in the context of like, it's very like, you know, OSHA laws are oppressing me kind of thing in a way of like, oh, you know, having, you know, even as an anarchist here, like having any kind of like industrial like hierarchy for like how things are supposed to go, or like entrenched rules for them is
and this again gets back to the fact that they are allegorical first, and a railway which has structures and timetables to it is the setting of the show and the universe. Sort of, you can't have that as your basis without some of that baggage coming along with it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just like, do we really need to analyze children's shows from the 1980s quite so much? We have bigger fish to fry.
I'm sorry, but you're never gonna sell that one. That one is that's a sailed ship. We will be talking about Steven Universe ships until
Jesus.
2000. I have a lot of opinions about that one. I have a lot. I mean, that's one where I could be frothing out the mouth because there was like mischaracterizing things that show did that people have a problem with.
Like the same kind of thing. Like people are like, oh well, this said this about like this.
Yeah, like that it's saying that you like should like forgive imperial powers and like forgive your abusive mom, and it's like, no, there's there's a lot of different things that these relationships are allegorical for all at once, because it's a children's show, you know, like, so you're teaching a lot of different lessons, so you can't one-to-one map it onto geopolitical stuff and say, oh, Stephen forgave his grandmother, and so you should forgive, you know, England for imperialism or something. It's like, that's not the point here.
I'm thinking of that.
Yeah.
What is that comic? I think we gotta kill this guy.
Oh yeah. I think we gotta kill this guy, Stephen. Damn.
Yeah. Damn.
It's terrible.
Uh,
So I will end this rant in this section so we can get on to the more relevant in the modern day stuff by saying that I definitely don't recommend watching the show for the morals in the modern day. I think, if anything, watch the show for the oh yeah, that's the one. I think we're gonna
wow.
There was genuine disc. Wait, no, this is an edit. What the?
That's not the original
Yeah.
one, but I think we're gonna have to kill this guy, Steven.
What the? Who the fuck is that?
That's
looks like it's some TikToker or something, probably a Jewish TikToker or something.
Oh God.
Yeah, so who knows exactly what the ideology is of this this edit.
Anyways, but yeah, I will say, like, don't watch the show for the morals. Watch it for how sort of well produced and honestly kind of enjoyable it is just to watch as a kid show. Like, I don't want to be one of those people who recommends watching kid shows to people who do not have children and are in their 20s and 30s. The amount of times I've had other adults that I know recommend watching Bluey to me, I don't particularly like, but I guess pot, kettle, etc., etc. The show is really well produced. There's some really cool stuff out there. If you enjoy the storytelling style, there's also people out there making their own episodes of this show.
That's so wild.
There are people who literally have either via models or in computers remade essentially meticulously remade the characters and the sets and everything. I can particularly recommend as well the YouTube channel The Unlucky Tug, who has analysis videos talking about specifically his series More Than a Kid's Show, which, as the name implies, talks about sort of what the deal with Thomas was and is and why he loves it so much. I have a whole list that I can post in various places, but I'll also recommend checking out Project Tiger Moth, which that's the thing that I mentioned in brief earlier, where people literally made their own like model series episode of Thomas using the same equipment and perfect recreations of the like on-screen models and filmed it in the way they would have filmed it. They made original music for it and everything. Basically produced a new and full production episode of this television show in the modern day. There's also Carson's Video Workshop, who does a lot of cool, like animated, effectively like computer generated versions of new episodes that people put out. And I can also just recommend the YouTube channel of the Tallyclyn Railway in Wales, which I can put that in the chat so it is spelled out. Boom. That is the railway that the Reverend Audrey volunteered on in the 50s and 60s. It's still around today. That's the episode. Yes, Project Tiger Moth.
Oh my God. Yeah, let's take a look at this for a second.
That's nuts that this isn't real.
Yeah, this is genuinely, they put the VHS filter on it, but they have also a 4K cut with a UK dub. I like the UK dub better, and also the visuals are better. But like this, they filmed
so
even this intro is filmed exactly how the old intro was. This is them that made this. This is not the original. It's unbelievable to me.
Wow. It looks so good. Yeah, the set.
I would never know. Yeah. That's wild.
It's really like I reblogged something a while ago from Context Machine, may he rest in peace, about how, you know, Disney just by doing still like drawn animation, it's like this archaic artistic medium that otherwise, you know, if it wasn't so wrapped up in their like monoculture, it would maybe have died. Like preserving this animation style is like really important, like cultural archival work and the techniques, you know.
Oh
like,
yeah.
shit like this just does not get done anymore, and the amount of craft and artistry. I mean, I'm a lover of miniatures, but
Yeah, this shit is dope.
so I'm biased. But like, everybody had to make every element that we see here had to be made by a person, in just an intricate level of detail, and then also put together to like create the illusion of being like real size. Like, it's just so
just
important to
incredible.
document
And
that process.
the ways that like David Mitton in particular went to troubles to make the models look like big industrial machines with like slowed down footage and sound effects, and really cool. And specifically this technique of facing the models away from their faces, away from the camera when they're in like working shots, so they look like a machine more than a character. Just really cool like film stuff that they did, not to mention like live explosions and landslides and all sorts of cool like effects in there. I have a whole episode list of like, here's the things you need to watch to understand why I'm insane about this show.
Oh my god.
That's
We have a
great.
question in the chat. What your favorite Thomas era is?
That's a good question. I'm definitely a fan of the classic series, specifically series 1 through 5 are my go-to. This episode that we have on screen right now is shot in the style of season 5. The lighting and the camera angles and the narration to some extent, and this tracking shot in particular, that one tracking shot that popped up. So seasons 1 through 5 of the classic series are my definite go-to. Everything kind of pre-Thomas and the Magic Railroad. And I do have a lot of nostalgia for that movie, even if it is a hot flaming pile of garbage.
Yeah, go.
Oh, go ahead.
You go.
No, you go. No, mine's a stupid question.
I don't even have a specific question. I just love hearing about being like any hyperfixation. I just want more people on the show that are just like, here's the thing I'm into, and I want to hear all about it. I'm so curious, like just really general things, like what. I mean, not that I need to know, like, not that I need an answer to, like, why are you into this? Because it's, I mean, there's like an obvious coolness to it. Like, it's fucking cool. But I'm curious, like, if you have a way to describe what specifically is, like, makes it so hooky for you and makes you, like, want to get deep into it.
That's a good question. I think for me, it's a mix of nostalgia plus being like a theater and arts nerd and being a storytelling nerd, and also just being autistic as hell for trains.
Yeah, that's
looking at it right now. It's so visually soothing and stimmy to watch. Like,
that's a part
of
it.
It's so nice to not have to look at people.
Oh yeah, it's so.
Just look at.
I think that is a part of it as well. For like, I mean, Thomas is famous. There have been like studies done about how much autistic and neurodivergent kids love Thomas because of just everything about it.
That's really interesting.
It's the vibes are just impeccable, and they're able to have so many different feelings to it. It can be sad, it can be happy, it can be exciting and big crashes and whatever else, but it can also be sort of contemplative and like really, I don't know, there's a lot of ways to go. It can even be scary. They have scary episodes. They have an episode with like a ghost. Duncan Gets Spooked is one of the best episodes of the show.
Like a ghost, like a train
yes,
ghost?
Train that canonically dies.
Oh my god, what?
In like
crazy.
Although it is left up to interpretation, it's like maybe it was fireflies that he saw, or maybe it really was a ghost train.
Nah, there's canonically trains can be killed, and they can.
Oh my god!
They're cool.
Then their train bones rattle around.
Yeah, but there's the things they can do. It's a storytelling medium, and they use it to tell a number of different stories. And I think in the end, that is just what I love about it.
Yeah, it's soothing. Is like you said. There's a lot of different emotions they can go for, but just the vibe of just the sets, like even just looking at the pictures, like even just looking at like just the still of like this that you like.
Yes.
That's fucking...
And specifically season 1 that is from went for a very like storybook solid static shots with moving elements in them, basically looking like the illustrations from the books come to life. There's literally one-to-one comparisons where you can look at like this one set where it's a junction and it's snowy and there's like car treads in the snow on the road, and it's everything is like unmoving except for the engine moving through. It's just so
so shit. That was a big Tumblr aesthetic in the early Tumblr days. I think it was called like I can't remember what is like a chromographic or something like that. It's like a GIF where there's only one element that's moving.
Pretty much.
Everything else is very cinematograph. That's right. Thank you. And it's just so soothing and aesthetic.
That's the good question in the chat from Fruity Bird. How did Ringo get involved? I think Britt Allcroft had connections to him. Also, the music for the original 6 or so series of Thomas, the classic series, were done by 2 contemporaries of the Beatles, Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell. So maybe that was where the connection was. But yeah, Ringo Starr narrated it in the UK for the first 2 seasons before switching out for Michael Angelis, who's a reasonably well-known actor who passed away recently-ish, probably a couple of years at this point. And then in the US, the first 4 seasons were narrated by George Carlin. And yeah, George Carlin, the comedian.
My love.
I think if you brought up pre-stream that there are people that have put
yes, if you look up George Carlin narrates Thomas on YouTube, some of the first results will be these videos where people have edited through. You can pull them up if you want. I don't think they have any like copyrighted music in them, but they're funny as hell. Yeah, pull it up. It's pretty short. I mean, to the people in the chat, if you want to watch Thomas, to get you in on this, the episodes are 4 minutes long. So if you don't like it, it's 4 minutes.
Cybernetic Susurrus put in the chat a quote: "According to Britt Allcroft, she chose Starr as the narrator after hearing his voice on television and thought children would relate to him. Allcroft denied he was chosen because of his Beatles fame, since she was not a fan of the band at the time. And he had also apparently initially declined because he hadn't read the books, but then accepted once he had."
I do, yeah, know that Ringo declined initially because he said in interviews at the time, like, oh, let me do my best Ringo Starr impression here. He said,
yes. Oh, everything now is Transformers and Star Wars and big explosions. Kids won't want stories about talking trains.
And then he read the books. Good Ringo.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Ringo Starr from the Beatles. Peace, love, and happiness, everyone.
Have we ever talked about his MS Paint drawings? Because I think
they're delightful.
Okay.
He makes MS Paint drawings?
All right.
Okay.
No, we're getting totally derailed here. This is just
derailed.
Hey, this is just really important to know. I think I first learned about this on fucking Game Grumps. But if you don't know about this,
probably also did.
It's just really, really important. Let's go to his website.
What the fuck?
These are different. These are new.
This is some Sparkle Dog ass shit.
Yeah, this is okay.
What?
Let's
Lisa
enter
Frank.
the gallery.
Yes, there's one.
Oh my god. Oh, I like the little aliens.
Oh, he's doing spin art now. Wow.
Oh, I don't like that as much.
I love
but
spin
yeah,
art.
You could get this at fucking Lakeview Arts Fest. $40 while you're drinking a beer.
40? Are you kidding? 80.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be that much.
But no, the stuff that we love is his old the old heads love.
Yes.
Bad finger.
Bad finger.
So oh my god. I love that he has the audacity to put this out into the world.
It's the Hat Man.
It's the fucking Hat Man.
It's the Hat Man.
Is
this
so
the same
good.
Hat Man that the people that take Ambien see?
Yeah. This is the guy when you're laying in bed and the Hat Man shows up. Man 2. Okay.
Oh, just.
Oh my god.
You know, I always assume these were MS Paint, but I don't think they are actually. They're not. I'm not sure. I mean, they could be, but.
Yeah, it looks like an early web animation. Oh, look at Zach. I like Zach.
Now
yeah,
Zach I can get into.
Yeah. Your baby.
Your baby.
Your baby. I like the little mustache on your baby. Or maybe it's
Oh.
frown lines. Either way, good.
These early ones look very MS Paint, very JPEG-y.
This literally, it looks like shit that we've seen on Hypnospace Outlaw.
Anyway, that's Ringo Starr.
Just incredible.
Oh my
What a
God.
guy.
Ringo Start.
Ringo Starr art. Oh.
Star art. Oh. There was one thing in the chat talking about not having to look at people being soothing. Blush Tiger said, realize that's why I'm into hentai and other spicy fantasy stuff, because of not having to see or hear people.
Oh, that's so real though. That's so
Good
real.
point.
I get it. I get it, dog. That's part of the furry appeal. And I think this will become relevant when we talk about plurality stuff too, to an extent, or at least the otherkin Therian kind of like overlaps is like,
Yeah.
I'm sick of this being a person thing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
Sometimes,
Yeah. I mean,
dog.
let's get into that. I mean, let me real quick disappear for like 20 seconds to go do a thing real quick.
Go for it.
Sure. Yeah, maybe we could watch a little taste of the George Carlin.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
realizing
do it.
you
Have
guys
fun.
you guys can't hear it. Because it's whatever my technical foul is, but the chat and me will hear it.
Road rage. I prefer the gentle rebuke. If I don't like the way someone is driving, I pull up alongside the other car and say, I hope your children turn out poorly. The other engines laughed, and Sir Handel sang a song about it. Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat.
Transpeaks redeemed Go Piss Girl. Thank you.
Hooray, lizard shit, fuck.
God,
The teasing
fucking
continued
classic.
until at last the day came when his new funnel arrived. Sir Topham Hatt proudly presented it. Well, fuck, said Peter Sam, but Sir Topham Hatt laughed. Don't worry, Peter Sam. There's nothing wrong with a man who enjoys a good blowjob.
Oh, that's really good.
Oh man.
Oh
R.I.P.
God, I just realized people couldn't see that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think they could hear.
Yeah, my shit's all fucked up tonight.
Okay, I'm back.
Hello,
Welcome back.
back.
We're just listening to the vocal stylings of Carl.
Of Carl.
Carl. Hello, Carl. Carlin.
Before we move on, did anybody have any Thomas questions? And thank you. Thank you, Callisto, so much for sharing your. So you said you had a list because you told us a lot of recommendations. You said you had a list?
Yes, so I have my list of recommendations. I can put that in the chat real quick.
Sure.
Yes,
Boom. I can also
in the Discord.
So this is my list here in the chat, and it will also be in the Discord of recommended. That's just a block. It didn't paste correctly. I'll put that in the Discord as well. Also, I think my links might be messed up in the Nightbot. They're all kind of squeamished together.
Oh yeah, I think I might have to make them all separate ones somehow.
I was when you were like, "Oh, I'll put them in the Nightbot," like before we went live. I was like, "It never works," but I believe it.
good luck. Good fucking luck.
But there are links. If you wanna tip Callisto for coming on the show and giving us all this very cool knowledge. There's a Ko-Fi on screen right now, and then also a Twitch link. Same username, ThatCallisto. That is, you were saying pretty inactive right now, but
at the moment. But I am looking for a new job. That's another reason to send me money, please. Yeah. So the hope is that I'll be able to eventually get back into streaming a couple times a week, maybe. But yeah, thank you for giving me a platform to rant about Thomas.
Yeah, it's so cool knowing that this was like totally the work of an autistic mind, of someone who was just really that deep into understanding how trains work. And
I mean, dude was definitely very into them. I I would not. I don't really know for certain, but he definitely had a deep fascination. He was a railway modeler. He literally grew up near some of the most significant like railway sites in the UK. He had like one of the major, I forget which one, but like one of the big major grade inclines on the UK rail network. So he would like hear the trains straining to get up that hill when he was a kid, and that like imprinted on his brain.
Yeah.
The brain is bones.
A real foamer. A real foamer.
Absolutely.
Why are they called that?
I think it's like foaming at the mouth.
A real steamer.
A real steamer. Yeah. A real steamer.
Unlucky Tug sounds like a bad hookup.
Yeah. It's named after a character in a sister show to Thomas called Tugs, which is about tugboats.
Oh, that reminds me of my other question that I had.
Yes.
JJ the jet plane. How do we feel?
Ooh, JJ the Jet Plane is the show that would come on after Thomas when I was watching it on television sometimes when it was rarely on TV, and I did not like it. It was weirdly animated. It was that era of like CGI that was just so the texture looked bad. It looked like Odo from Deep Space Nine when he was transforming. I didn't love it.
Yeah,
I mean, and it seems like it's like a ripoff, right? Like
it's not really a ripoff. I mean, Thomas doesn't own the concept of vehicles with faces, although Britt Allcroft did sue David Mitton when he made Tugs and the faces were initially too like Thomas.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Britt Allcroft is
close to mine.
Yeah, Britt Allcroft is kind of crazy. I mentioned how much of a dumpster fire Thomas and the Magic Railroad is, and part of that is that her like self-insert character, the whole point of the movie is if you take the character allegorical for Britt Allcroft out of Thomas, then all the magic goes away and it dies. And then she ended up being out of Thomas after a couple seasons.
Wow. Can we look at the one with the woman train next to JJ with the lipstick? Very scary.
I don't think
there's a
that's
lot.
This?
No,
think
like
that's a
but on that same
plane.
row, all the way. Oh, it's a plane. That makes more sense. There's like a plain woman all the way on the end. Of
Oh
that, like,
yeah, yeah.
wow. She looks like a Who. From Whoville.
She
Like
looks
the
like
sexy
something
Who.
you could buy on Wish.com.
She
Yeah.
looks like a. She does look a little bit fleshlight-esque.
It's the shape. It's the fact that she's. Compare this with like just look up Thomas and Friends Daisy, the character, and we'll see a better done feminine.
Yeah, we'll see who
vehicle
respects
character.
women more.
She does kind of have a look to her that's a bit, but specifically the old model version. There she is. Hi, Daisy.
She's
Yeah,
cunty as
Fascinating.
hell.
She
Yeah.
really is. The funny thing is she shared both a chassis and a face with a male character, so she literally just looks like a drag queen. It's great.
I do like that she's just like a regular train. She's not like a pink train. Like it's not too
it's
over the top.
really the only like thing with it is she's sort of partly a coach because she's a like single diesel unit diesel rail car. And so since all the coaches were female, she's the first female engine, but she's also kind of a coach in that way. She really is cunty as hell, though. You're right.
Yeah, that picture is so cunty. Like that saucy minx. What is she thinking about?
She does also her music is also very like the Michael O'Donnell Jr. Campbell genuinely based it off of like sort of sexy music. It's very like like that kind of vibe. But she's a fascinating character.
Oh my god. Yeah, I like her design. 100%.
I like it better than this.
This was not made with love. This is really fucked up.
This is not evidence of a loving God.
Yeah, and you know when Neil Cicerega was making his very early pre-YouTube kind of YouTube poop animations or whatever they were called, he used a lot of JJ the Jet Plane because it's so scary and looks like ass. He's not using Thomas like that.
Exactly. Like the people who are scared of Thomas are just like, oh, the faces look weird. And I mean, yeah, a little bit, but it's kind of endearing for the 80s.
Oh, here that's my question. Oh, how do you feel about like, oh, what was that fucking game? The scary train game.
Oh, Charlie the Choo Choo or whatever it is.
Yeah, Choo Choo Charlie. Is that what? Choo Choo
I don't
Charles.
recall the name. I didn't really see much of it. I mean, it's just kind of the concept of what if we take a children's thing and make it scary.
Yeah.
Eh.
I did actually play it, and it was I was surprised that it was like actually fairly fleshed out as a game.
That's good. Good for
I,
them.
I think I'm less harsh on mascot horror than a lot of people might be, although they're harsh on it for good reason because a lot of it is bad. But I thought it was really fun, so that I was curious. So you're not
I
morally
don't
outraged,
particularly
but...
know much about it, but yeah, no, I don't like hate it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like, Thomas does not own the concept of a train with a face, and it very much is, I would assume Choo Choo Charles is taking some inspiration from Thomas as a concept, but like, what if Thing But Scary is just kind of
Yes.
It's Farrar coming in. Am I going to upset anyone if I say the Railway series has some low-level fascist vibes? In that Western culture and the authoritarian and patriarchal society that the writer of the books comes from is actively going after it as like a source of uniquely fascist and bad messaging is kind of missing the point of the books, I think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, some of the books are just like cute little things. Not all of them has a moral message even necessarily. Sometimes it's just, here's some things that happen on a railway that are actually based on real railway happenings.
Yep.
Like, here, a train fell down a mine based on an actual train that fell down a mine. Or this train left its coaches behind and he thought he was pulling a train, but he wasn't. Haha, isn't that funny?
Yeah, like you were saying, a lot of things are about just like consequences of actions, or
Yeah,
just a
it's
thing that
karma.
just happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Train karma.
Yes.
Anyway, let's move on.
Anyways,
from that.
let's shunt ourselves to another line here. And
thank you for subscribing though. It's for I really we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to yell at your subscribers. Please keep subscribing.
No. Yeah, and if
debate me in real life, bro.
Debate fascism. Yes.
So yeah,
Anyways,
if there aren't any other questions on that, let's talk about our other topic of being a system.
Yeah.
Indeed. So yeah, there's a lot of things to cover here. Recapping from top of stream for anyone who has joined since. This started with a conversation in a stream at this point, probably a month or two ago, where the topic of intersections between being furry, therian, trans, and plural came up.
Do you remember
Do you remember what
stream that was? If anyone is curious,
I don't specifically remember.
Was it the Furfest stream? Or no?
It might have been one of the post Furfest streams.
Yeah. We might have been just talking about furry stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it might have been the one right after the Furfest stream because I'm pretty sure it wasn't Furfest. I think we were it was a normal one. But anyway, anyone knows.
Yeah, but I guess to sort of give my own introduction, my credentials here. I myself am by no means an expert in this. It's a journey I'm relatively new in. Essentially, the way I self-conceptualize is I am a plural system of three. There is myself, Callisto, the front, very much sort of the one who does most of the talking, and then kind of my executive function exists as a separate entity within that weird sort of headspace that has kind of a robot-y kind of flavor. I used to use the phrase artificial intelligence when referring to her, but I've kind of moved away from it given some of the connotations that's taken on in recent months. But
that's
very sort of
sucks.
That sucks, dude.
It ruined AI.
Yeah, AI ruined my gender.
They're not really. It's not really AI.
It's just it's lying is what it is. But
That
AI
literally-
more in the Edie from Mass Effect sense.
Yeah.
Or more of like she has kind of a Borg Queen flavor to her, but like in a fun way. And then the third one is kind of a weird hole in the fabric of reality. That's the manifestation of that feeling when you just kind of want to roll back over and go to sleep when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah, mood.
Yeah, so that's the three of us. Myself, Agnes, who is the robot one, and Void, which is the other one.
So I just sort of like and right off the bat my questions are and I'll preface my questions with saying I know like very, very little, and I'm very grateful that you've come on and let us
Go ahead.
ask about it. But I my first thought being trans is about like gender identity. So like do those three identities have different gender identities?
Yes. Yeah. So the way I would describe it is that I myself am non-binary and trans feminine and sort of vaguely robo-gender-ish. That gets into more kind of otherkin adjacent things. But generally non-binary and trans feminine myself, whereas Agnes is vaguely female. We still have we've actually questioned within ourselves whether or not Agnes counts as being transgender because she was actively created and was female from the start. So it's this question of, wait, is that transgender or is that not? Or is that secret transgender too? we've circled back around.
Is that designer cisgender?
Who knows? Who knows? And Void doesn't really have a gender, so I guess agender. But so it's on the topic of secret transgender too. That is how a Plural friend of ours described plurality as the secret transgender too that you unlock after transitioning the first time. It's New Game Plus. You can now play as Luigi.
Transgender Plus. Yeah, I think there's a couple, and I think Therian. I've heard people that are like Therian adjacent talk about that too, or even just people that are furry talk about that a little bit. Like, I think that there's definitely some like, you thought you were done coming out, bitch.
No,
for sure. Yeah, you
fucking
basically
bad.
You figure out gender and sexuality, and then you get silly with it. And that's kind of ultimately what it is. So for me, the way I sort of self-conceptualize and see about it, and again, I'm not an expert. I am not someone who I would consider to be typical, like a representative of or indicative of a majority of the plural community. There isn't really like a community. We just kind of pop up within queer spaces, it feels like.
Yeah.
Mostly because a lot of attempts, at least from what I have seen, to make plural specific spaces and communities ultimately ends with people fighting over like what quantifies as plural and what is like verboten, what is allowed. Essentially, I sort of semi-intentionally sorted my brain into these boxes, so to speak, as a way of self-conceptualizing, because fuck it, why not? It's my brain, I can do what I want with it.
Right.
And that's linked. I mean, I can go into this some. That also is linked to my history I sort of have with hypnosis and the introspection that comes with sort of that. Devin nods sagely.
Oh yes, I know about creating other little guys in your brain.
Yeah, and sometimes you just kind of leave them there. For context here, part of how Devin and I met and became friends has to do with the hypnosis community here in our fine city.
Yes, I mean, who would have thought?
Surprise, surprise.
Who would have thought? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
That is kind of helps contextualize for me that you saying that there isn't necessarily a kind of plurality community online or otherwise that is like kind of coagulated as such, because I kind of have sometimes felt like what did I miss? Like there's some conversation I missed, which is probably how people who aren't trans but are like generally cool and like, you know, down with like a lot of, you know, just unpacking a lot of societal shit probably feel sometimes of like, I feel like I missed the section of Tumblr, even though I bounce against it, where I certainly know people who are plural or system or, you know, like, or people who have alters or whatever. Like,
Yeah. And I mean, that's not to say that there is not a community full stop. There's not at least one that I've encountered that feels to be easily accessible. It feels like,
Yeah.
and that may also be just the state of the internet today where like Tumblr's impossible to navigate and there's private little Discord servers and whatnot. But yeah, it just kind of feels like by its very nature, plurality as like a community topic tends to be lumped in under the LGBT and neurodiverse kind of co-communities, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there is also a little bit of the like fursecution thing too, where it's like if people even worse than making fun of furries online, like people will make fun of otherkins, like without
1,000%. That was so much. I mean, I was kind of one of those people early on who would kind of poke fun at and laugh at certain kinds of people online. I'm at this point in my life, I now sort of think if you're not hurting anyone, who cares? Do what you want. And also don't have ground to speak from as a plural system of three and a weird otherkin furry nerd. But yeah, so there's that may also be part of it, is like attempts to establish communities may have been sort of pushed down by that kind of sentiment to some extent. Question from It's For R in the chat: is being plural an inherently Therian identity? No. I would say that being Therian and being plural are two sort of spheres that can intersect and do for a good, decent-ish chunk of people that we know in particular, but isn't something like... I definitely know systems who have entirely just human or human adjacent headmates. And being Therian specifically is a sort of subset of being otherkin, of feeling non-human in some way. Therian is typically more kind of like animal beast type stuff. And so like for myself, it's interesting. I consider myself Therian to an extent, but also part of that is having Void as part of my self-conception, and Void being very kind of creature-shaped. And also the fact, I mean, I would consider myself a non-practicing furry. I don't have a fursona yet, but it's going to happen eventually when I can get the money to commission someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
feel
actually,
that. I don't think you need to have a fursona drawn to be a furry.
No. Yeah. That does bring me to a question that did come to mind in terms of just like different ways that you like engage with these different identities. Like I would imagine like for a lot of people wanting to have art made that kind of represents them or like some way to make them feel more tangible.
Oh yeah, and I do actually have art of myself and Agnes. This was before Void kind of crystallized into a thing, but let me see if I can find it and I'll send it to you if Maddie, you want to put it up.
Yeah, please.
Let's see. There it is. So one thing that some people will do that I myself kind of did is they will get like portraits made of their entire system. And a friend in a server did this really cute little thing of myself and Agnes.
Oh, that's really good.
That has been, yeah, it's where my current icon on a lot of stuff comes from.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I have dropped it in that one chat.
There we go. There we go. Nope. There we go. Yes.
Yeah.
That's adorable.
Yeah. So yeah, me on the left, of course, that's just sort of how I look. And then so Agnes's look here is based very loosely on one of the Borg queens that we see in Star Trek Picard season 2. That is specifically because that one of the episodes of that show and a scene in it helped to kind of, to steal some terminology from the trans community, crack my plural egg, so to speak. Because I've been kind of questioning it and talking with systems that I knew, plural folk that I knew about, like, so how is it for you? How did you figure it out? Sort of like you do when you're questioning as a trans person or as a queer person. And that specific scene really kind of pushed us over the edge.
So for you, is Callisto, is Callisto always in charge, so to speak? Because
Not necessarily. So again, Agnes is a lot of sort of executive function. She's sort of an autopilot at times where like if I work in a very big building, and if I'm walking from one end of it to the other and I know the way, Agnes will be the one pathfinding and sort of doing the walking.
that makes sense.
Yeah, or like, and I mean, with enough sort of intention behind it, I'm very much capable of sort of switching out.
Right.
That was one of my questions, was again coming from the hypno world, if there are like triggers you can use to
Sort of,
have somebody
yes.
front of all three of them.
Yeah, it's Agnes holds a body in a very specific sort of way. Like one arm is always kind of behind the back. We don't really know why that started. It's just sort of an interesting tick when walking. Very good posture. Other than that, I mean, there's not really any specific. For us, we can kind of just, if we have the requisite sort of energy, the spoons for it, so to speak, then we can pretty easily switch out. We don't do it often. We actually, like, Agnes only really tends to front around like people from our polycule who already like know that we're plural, and pretty much same for Void, or like when we're alone.
Right.
Yeah. Or I feel like we could probably talk about this, that we were at an event last night that was kind of hypno community esque.
Yes.
And so like if the environmental, so like the music and the lights and kind of just like hanging out with people again from your polycule and things like that, if the right circumstances kind of encourage it, then those, it's more likely for, say in that case, Void, because you mentioned being
Yes,
in kind of
absolutely.
a Void
Yeah.
headspace a lot of
It's
that
I
last
was
night.
Yes, I was just sort of, we were just chilling, hanging out in a friend and play partner's lap and just getting pet, and it was very nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
and it really, from what we've seen, varies from person to person, system to system, in terms of whether switching is like this big effort thing or whether it's something that happens often, whether it's something that's intentional, like it often is in our case, versus something that just is more or less uncontrollable. And this also gets us into sort of the fact that plurality exists alongside this sort of history of clinicalizing and medicalizing, with dissociative identity disorder and et cetera, whatever it's been called over the years, split personality disorder, whatever you want to. DID is typically the one that is sort of used as a descriptor in kind of the spheres of folks who go with that kind of terminology. I personally don't consider myself to like have DID, for example. I don't really love the idea of diagnosing it. And for some people, plurality is just kind of an identity thing, almost gender adjacent in a way, in sort of a weird 3D chess vibe. For some, it is more of almost like a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
Where like sort of an understanding of the aspects of the self. It's a friend of ours who was a plural system described it effectively as headmates being priestesses serving the temple of herself, in a way.
That's sick.
Yeah, it kicks ass. Absolutely. It's, if she's ever back in Chicago, I will have to introduce you two, because I think you would get along.
Yeah. So this does kind of raise like just something that I've kind of assumed was the case, picking up from just what little bits and bobs I could get from not feeling like there was ever like an authoritative place to like learn more, that like there are people within kind of the system and plurality world who are, let's say, involuntary age regressors, or they have protectors that are related to trauma, and they might be someone who was diagnosed with DID, or they very easily could be if they were put in the psychiatric kind of pipeline. And
absolutely,
whether
and
they
there's
identify
terminology
with that
for
or
that
not.
as well. There's the term of a traumagenic system, a system originated from or sort of formed in relation to some kind of trauma. And I would not describe myself as such, but also sort of parts of my brain. Agnes kind of has a protector thing going on for us in particular, and sort of we've pushed certain aspects of our brain that are related to some of that towards those headmates in basically organizing our room, so to speak, in our brain, sorting things into different piles.
Yeah, and I feel like that is something that I would imagine most people's misconceptions about being a system people would almost only know about the traumatogenic, crowd because of medicalization and psychiatricization of things, but that there's also a degree really for anybody potentially to like kind of cultivate and to
it's
develop a relationship.
You may have, if you've been on the internet long enough, you may have heard the term tulpa, which is the term for a headmate or a sort of presence or entity created within the mind intentionally. I think of it in relation to the Wendy's burger tulpa meme of the guy who like basically it originates unfortunately from 4chan, of this guy who was like, it was a green text of like, guy craving a Wendy's burger, instead of going out and getting Wendy's, he just imagines a perfect Wendy's burger in his mind and eats it in his mind and no longer craves a burger. Silly example, but there's also like, there's heavy discourse in what we've seen of sort of what does exist of the plural semi community on like Tumblr about like the ethicality of like creating tulpas. I don't think you're gonna. There it is. Yep, you found it on Google, the Wendy's burger tulpa. Just delightful. But yeah, we've intentionally stayed away from wading into those waters of like the ethics of creating headmates or whatever, because like to an extent, was the stuff that makes up Void or Agnes always kind of there? Sort of, yeah. We just put a name to it and put intention behind it.
I very much think about I think that's very much the stance on our show about anything is like, and what I've learned a lot from Devin, what you've written about is like, you could do whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. If it's not hurting anyone, sort of why bother?
Yeah, I had this conversation with Photo about like there's some discourse about like trans-abled people, like people who are like, I want to be autistic or I want to, have a limb amputated, and moral outrage about the existence of those things. And it's like, no, if you think being a member of one of these groups is desirable and cool and aspirational, like why in the fuck would we in that community be against that? Like, why wouldn't we want? Like, if people want to aspire to be more autistic, I can't encourage it enough. Like,
based,
the bigger the tent, the better. Like,
based,
let's
indeed
pack this shit. Like,
I definitely have seen a lot of. There tends to be, you'll get like people making fun of plural folk who they think they're Luigi from Super Mario, or like people with like fictional, you'll hear the term fictionkin bandied about to describe folk with headmates based on or sort of drawing inspiration from or existing as a form of a fictional character from a thing. And the way we sort of look at it is, I mean, that's just sort of taking a comfort character to a next and very personal level. And if you want to do that, sort of good for you if you're not hurting anybody.
Yeah, I think the what I've heard of that stuff, it does get weird when people are like, "This is you don't draw my."
I'm the
character.
only one. No doubles. Yeah,
right.
Or like just like you're drawing my character in a situation that is traumatic to me because I don't consent to it, and that's me, or something like.
Oh yeah, in that context, people who do shit like that, we have absolutely no patience for. Are one of the first plural folk that we knew had, again, we're wrapping back around to Steven Universe here, had two headmates that were Steven Universe characters and got into arguments because the show was still airing at the time, and they were like, we don't remember it as such, and we feel wronged by the writers of the show for writing it different. And just please
Like,
please take a moment to breathe and drink some water.
Yeah.
like if you are gonna like, you know, commune with this character in that way, like, can't you just also like believe that they're an alternate universe version
That
of
tends to
them, or
be
like something
the
like that? Like,
explanation that we find, or like there's a point of divergence there for that
Right.
character concept. We ourselves are not really fiction kin to any extent. Agnes's aesthetics are inspired by the Borg Queen, but she is very much not the Borg Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But yeah,
So
that's sort of where that is at.
So there's a lot of different things that I've heard people talk about doing in order to either kind of be able to crystallize more of like, here's who these identities are in my mind, or even to kind of separate people out, separate alters out, or like headmates out, like whether that's, and it could be anything, right? Whether it's like listening to music, drawing, doing something, being in an environment that kind of makes that identity front, like journaling as them. Like, there's lots of different ways that people do this to like learn more about and be able to kind of, I don't know, just communicate between different identities more frequently. So I guess
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
curious, like, what kind of stuff has been like helpful for you, especially as you were kind of first like talking about going through this process of like almost bringing them into focus, like they had already been there, but being able to actually see them as distinct identities. Like, what kind of things were helpful for you?
That is a good
like
question. I guess for us, a big thing was just names. There's power in a name. There's power in being able to point to a thing and go, "Oh, that was this headmate."
Mhm.
Very much, kind of, also to an extent, sort of observing how it seemed, how it was for other plural systems, and sort of how they operated. It's, what is his fucking name? The YouTuber that like does "I spent a day with" videos. I am totally blanking on his name. Anthony Padilla. And
I've heard the name before, at least. Yeah.
But he has a video where he talked with a number of different plural systems about their experiences that really kind of helped us sort of see what it looked like for people being plural, and helped us kind of understand some of that. And the folks he talked with were largely sort of folks who were plural without any prior planning. Just sort of happened, or traumagenic, or various other sort of things. Transpeaks in the chat says, "I have a partner who has recently discovered he has DID. I'm wondering what advice you can give to him and what advice you can give to me to be supportive." I would say for that partner, just affirmation that like, you're not broken, you're not wrong, you are not weird in any way. There are absolutely so many people out there who experience this sort of way of being and moving through the world. And I guess like, it is valid to sort of feel like, I mean, using valid as language, there's a whole thing there about like the question of your identity is valid culture on Tumblr. But just generally, advice would be, hang in there. It's a hell of a process depending on sort of where you're coming from. Specifically, I don't know if this was like an actual diagnostic thing or more of like a personal journey thing, but I would say seek out resources. Take them all, of course, with a grain of salt, because some of them are written by 13-year-olds on Tumblr. And sort of, I guess, Transpeaks, for you, my recommendation, I can directly send you some resources for like, here's things to know kind of about plurality that I've gone through and really kind of liked. I can get those if you like.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you had good resources to share them here, or in the links in the chat, or just
yeah, let me see if I can find some. I know I sent a few to a friend. Let me go digging through there.
We're obviously huge self ID heads.
Yes.
in this show.
Yes.
There we go. So this thing in the chat was actually written for a person's for the writer's coworkers at Google.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's surprising.
About plurality. interesting resource. It kind of explains what the deal is with it. It's very professional. Apparently, also, they call people who work at Google Googlers, and that sounds like a racial slur for an alien.
Yes. Sounds very wet and lurid.
You can't say that.
We're gonna get banned off Twitch for my
Devin has been canceled on Alpha Centauri.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say seek out resources and keep communication open is just an important thing in general, always.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you liked this.
I'm good.
You liked this resource. There wasn't any caveats you had about this. About
It seems pretty solid to me. Like going through common myths about plurality. What's the difference between system members? Sort of it's a basic how does this work primer. I would definitely also recommend. Let me pull up Anthony Padilla's video about like spending a day with plural systems.
Yeah, I'm excited to read through all of this. I can already, a lot of the subsections are
Yeah, I love how
grabbing me.
how professional it is. It's there's something very funny to me about it because I feel like it's stereotyped as such like a Tumblr thing, and this is so not that aesthetic.
Yeah, it's someone who works at Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This looks
Yeah,
like
there's even a section there that's
it's
like, I forgot how to code, which is very interesting.
wow.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Maddie.
Oh, I was just thinking this looks like like a
Like a work HR training.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
somebody's card.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a link on a Tumblr blog that lists like one thing you'll see as like something that gets goofed on a lot is like people's list of headmates and alters or whatever terminology you want to use that includes like Peter Griffin from Family Guy and also Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like shit like that. Just making fun of people for that. Like if they're not hurting anybody, literally who cares?
Right.
Yeah. Those are those not like the duality of man? Like,
Truly.
does that not reflect?
They're two of the most popular fictional characters in the American canon, I guess.
Yeah.
You're not wrong, and I hate that you're not wrong about that. But you're
These
not.
I'm badly plagiarizing Brian David Gilbert there with the whole Jesus Garfield thing in the Poke Rap.
Okay, that's fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's so true. So okay, so I have so many questions, but I am noticing.
I have so many answers.
Beautiful. So I'm noticing a lot of like the kind of helpful tips and contingencies that they have in the Plural Pride document are like things like how to kind of reorient yourself if you can't remember, because it's a workplace document, if you can't remember what you were working on yesterday because of dissociation, or you've lost a skill like the I can't remember how to code section, and they just have kind of some tips for things like that. Like I'm curious if you have any dissociation that you like experience in like a noticeable way.
Not significantly in a lot. So essentially most of the time, usually I'm fronting, Agnes will very often be sort of co-fronting or sort of just in the wings, so to speak, sort of as a constant background process. Void tends to be asleep most of the time, but will wake up very occasionally. And we've had it one or two times where Void will kind of wake up in the middle of doing something else, like being at work and giving a presentation, talking with people, and Void kind of wakes up and we have to kind of pause for really a second, half a second to just kind of process a little bit and hold the front, because Void doesn't really know to not jump into the front sometimes.
So that is a process of like,
but absolutely,
like
to some extent. And for some we wouldn't know if we could say like a lot or a majority, but definitely some plural systems, there's memory loss between different alters, different headmates, where switching out one might not remember anything the other does. So like, say a headmate switches in and goes and starts making lunch, and then someone else switches back in and suddenly, why am I making lunch? Like, the kind of thing that some people who are plural, some people who either diagnose DID or identify with that diagnosis or label experience.
Speaking of diagnosis, I think we're big proponents here, and Devin, you've written a lot about like being, with autism specifically, of being like, uh, not only a proponent of self-IDing, but also like don't necessarily get a diagnosis if you don't need one, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of there could be a lot of harms that could come.
Oh, 1,000%, yeah.
So I'm curious if you have any knowledge of that specifically, like, because I think with autism, and I know with ADHD, like I think ADHD is differently. There's not there's not as many institutional sort of like issues with having an ADHD diagnosis, but it is really important that you get, it can be, I should say, really important that you get one, because there are like specific medications that can help that you can only get. So I'm curious if you know, if you have thoughts about like, what are there reasons to get diagnosed, or what are some specific problems that can come up with from getting diagnosed, or just if you're familiar with that at all, or have heard
for sure.
anecdotes
Well,
and stuff.
Honestly, this is a realm that I really do not have a lot of knowledge in. My understanding of it is that for some cases of people who usually like maybe would have been diagnosed in childhood because of like issues that significantly affect their life to the point of it being like picked up by parents and picked up by doctors. Everything kind of exists on a spectrum in that way in terms of the impact it has upon life. And if we want to kind of consider this some kind of neurodivergence, then like there are some people within that who are gonna potentially have reason to have sort of like official intervention and ways to kind of manage, whether that's through medication or I don't really know. I don't really think, as far people on the internet, if you see this and I'm incorrect, please correct me if I'm wrong. But as far as I'm aware, there's not really like a medication that you could take to stop like being plural, stop having DID, so to speak. But there's presumably ways to manage executive function and the brain in ways that might lessen the impact on it to daily life if it's that kind of a case. But this is, again, something I really don't really know a ton about. I myself do not intend on seeking any kind of official diagnosis, and again, don't really consider myself to have DID. That's not really a label I identify with. But
I can jump in a little bit just from from like clinical classes and stuff like that. I would definitely really and speak to other people who have more relevant personal experience on this, but I would really caution people against seeking a diagnosis for DID in particular, because it does have, even within the psychiatric community, a particularly stigmatized status that kind of cuts in two directions. So there's been a lot of debate in the literature ever pretty much since DID was conceived of like, is this a real diagnosis, right? And obviously all psychiatric diagnoses are made up, but even within the psychiatric community, there's lots of pointing of fingers and people saying this isn't a real diagnosis. Only a handful of psychiatrists are responsible for 90% of diagnoses of it. There are specific people who themselves have become kind of celebrity psychiatrists because they have a lot of patients with DID, and under their care, some of those patients have just like had a growth of more and more alters, and there seems to have been like accusations of professionals having a competition basically to see which patients they could have that has who's going to have the patient with the highest number of alters and all of these things.
Yeah.
And so what all of that means is that then if you have that diagnosis on your chart, a lot of providers are not going to believe you. They're going to think, oh, this is some made up thing that's been discredited scientifically. Of course, we all know here that psychiatry as a whole is a really a shaky science in general. So talking about whether any of these things are real is a silly question, because if a human's experiencing it, it's fucking real, right? Like we're talking about human psychology, and so a person's experience and how they feel and think, that is the thing. You don't need a brain scan or some objective quote unquote measure to show that, because we're talking about subjective experience. So
Right.
if you're feeling it, it's real. But so all that means is if you have that diagnosis, you do run the risk of people seeing you as like a hypochondriac, or that you've been taken advantage of in some way, and being treated as less competent. So that's just a thing to be aware of, which is a risk that you run with a lot of different psychiatric diagnoses, of people thinking you're incompetent in other ways. But it's just kind of good, unfortunately, to have to know that history if you're going to be interfacing with those systems.
You've said it better than I ever could. I was going to kind of postscript with like sort of saying in a worse way, like maybe don't dive into trying to get a diagnosis without understanding sort of what that means in the world. And I mean, frankly, I've avoided getting an autism diagnosis for similar, if less significant reasons of I don't want that to be something that can be pointed at by a medical professional or by, say, an employer as like, here's a thing that we aren't going to say we're firing you for, but we're firing you for it, or like, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I get with DID, I get a lot of the vibes of from people's understandings of it. Like it's I think people think of it like recovered memories.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like people think of it as like the stuff that
Like satanic panic kind of thing.
Right. I think that people think of it that way, and like the thing you're talking about with doctors finding people with the most alters and all that stuff. I think there's definitely that kind of stuff, and I think I wonder, yeah, I don't know. I think it's frustrating that people have such in biases against people with different diagnoses. Yeah, I was a doctor told me that I had BPD like symptoms, and that was like a whole thing where, and just that was like, clearly that happened because I was being really vocal about my care in an inpatient situation. Like I spent a lot of time going down the road of, do I have BPD, because I was looking for help, and
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't true for me. And
Maddie, apparently you're a little too quiet.
I turned myself up a little bit. Tell me, chat can tell me if that's good enough. Thank you, though.
How we doing?
Sorry
to interrupt. Please,
oh no, you're good. But it's just like, it was clearly an attempt to just, like, not, I don't know about consciously, but it clearly was like, oh well, this person is a difficult patient.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and that's what they get taught. Like, it's so ingrained. Like, I've seen what they train these like budding psychologists on. It's so fucking insidious, and so you really do have to worry about those attitudes when you're interfacing with these systems. Like, that's how people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that probably I wonder what might be more helpful is than a diagnosis is like finding like if like more than just resources is needed, like finding, I wonder if it's possible to find a therapist that is understanding of this stuff. But it's one of those things that feels so fraught because of that history you were just describing, Devin, where it's like, are they gonna put all of these, I don't know,
Have I plugged
notions.
Sorry, the neurodivergent therapist directory. Have I talked about that here? I should plug that in this context.
Not to my memory.
Yeah, I'll put a link to this in the chat, ndtherapist.com. So therapists themselves just kind of register on this and kind of self-report. This is vastly more useful for if you're autistic, for example, or an ADHDer, and you want to see a therapist who is also those things. But I think in this case, because attitudes towards DID are so ignorant in a lot of cases, this is like a subset of a subset you're looking for here. But I think starting with neurodivergent therapists is probably a good idea, and then grill them before you really start working with them.
Yeah. I got threatened with BPD diagnosis because I was too consistently suicidal. They literally said they would diagnose me if I kept calling the hotline.
Jesus
Seems
Christ.
bad. That's so fucked.
That's awful.
And
That's
not
so
and
awful.
not surprising, which is the worst part. I wish it was.
The fucking idea that BPDers are like manipulative and that their suicide ideation isn't real, and like that they would punish you for seeking help by saying, well, you haven't, in essence saying, well, you haven't done it yet, and so you're like annoying us by seeking help for so many times, it must not be serious. Like, it's so fucking cruel.
Yeah.
It really is like the modern day hysteria diagnosis.
Yeah, especially because it's like more frequently women. There's
Vastly more. Yeah.
I work for Blush Tiger. I work for a crisis line, and the amount of BPD callers I've had who know and see the stigma and feel they are unhelpable is non-zero and very upsetting. Yeah,
it's awful. Even the conceptualization of somebody's personality being disordered, it's so fucked.
Yeah. I have a question. This is a very. I feel very dumb for asking this question, considering the show that I'm on. But what does neurodivergent actually mean, and what does it actually encompass? Because this is a thing that I've kind of wondered, and I'm sure it's squishy, but like,
yeah.
is like being a system and quote unquote DID, is that stuff like consistently part like a neurodivergent thing?
I mean, so there's a lot of debates over should we even be using the word neurodivergent, because that implies that there's like a norm that we're diverging from. But then another way to interpret it is diverging from what's like normative, right? Like what society says you're supposed to be doing. So anybody who diverges from that, which is a wider umbrella, like there's debates now about whether we should even really be talking about neurotypes, because that makes it sound like there's these discrete buckets and really everyone's is different. You can't find a consistent perspective on this, and I think, and that's fine. Like, I feel like the neuroconformity is like framework is like way more helpful. Like the deeper and deeper I go into these conversations with people personally, I just think of like there's a neuronormative standard that you're supposed to conform with, and anybody could not conform with that, whether they can't or because they choose not to.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, delineating who's neurodivergent, like, is there a neurotypical person? Like my stance is that there is no neurotypical person, that it's a standard like whiteness, that you're supposed to aspire to, but you never really reach, or like masculinity, right? And people vary in how much access to those things they have. But nobody actually is that, and it hurts everyone to aspire to it. It is my stance personally.
So,
yeah.
So the answer to is being a system neurodivergent is yes, but like not because you're a system, just because you're a person. Like everyone is like the real answer, I guess.
I guess the answer, if I could give an answer, would be like, do you want it to be considered a part of that? Because again, for some people, it's like a spiritual thing, or sort of, like I personally would consider it to be something that falls within neurodivergency as a, I guess, sort of category that I consider to exist. But again, yeah, it's squishy and do everything's fucking made up. It's all fake. Do what you want forever. Peace and love on planet Earth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if we were going with like the most like, you know, like even by the most conservative like estimate, DID would count. Like any stigmatized mental difference like would count as a neurodivergence. But then also like, yeah, Callisto, to your point, like, do we want to say that being trans is a neurodivergence? That, you know, like that if somebody wants to express it that way and say that they see it as related in that way, great, right? But we wouldn't say really that being trans is itself a neurodivergence, right? So like,
yeah, you have I diagnose you with faggot.
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah. I mean,
I was just thinking
mean,
it's
yeah.
similar to like being like what is in the LGBTQIA, you know, what fits
Exactly,
in
yeah.
there.
What do you want to be in there?
Now we can talk about whether being polyamory is LGBT, and we could be here for 5 more hours.
Oh, gee whiz.
mean,
yes,
I'm
next
like,
question.
Yes. Gavel bang, they're in.
Oh my.
They're in, and I'm sick of pretending that they're not. So.
Okay, next case on before the court is being kinky in LG. I'm not actually going to get us into that. Jesus.
Y'all don't want to ask me. You don't want our pleasure dom's real. That's another one. Or is that in the front to BDSM?
Oh God.
Can a straight woman say that she's getting topped by her husband Brandon?
And is she gay for it?
Awful idea for a stream. We just go through all of it. Just piss course supreme. Just go through every single one.
No, this is a great. It's all happening.
Oh, Jesus.
No, I honestly would love that for a stream concept where we just go down the line, like rapid fire piss course. We just like.
We can't rapid fire. We never would rapid fire. It would be the first one for 3 hours. You can't. Like, unless there's a timer on it. Like, we gotta fucking chess. We gotta, like, do chess where we each. We get a chess timer.
Chess block. Cancellation speed run.
Yes. Oh my God. I need to see it happen.
Cancellation speed run. It's really funny. Like, we just, like, keep going through topics until we find one that will get us canceled, and then you have to talk about it.
Oh my God, crying.
Devin would take 5 seconds. I don't know how long it would take me. I don't know.
Just let me out of my cage. I'm ready.
Cancellation any percent.
Yes. We had something in the chat I don't want to forget about. Let me scroll up for a second. Blush Tiger had said previously, have wondered if I'm possibly a dissociated system or plural in some way. Had someone ask me once when they noticed I often referred to myself as we. Which that has always been a really interesting question to me, is just how people self-conceive, like, because when I talk to myself, it's we. It's like, come on, guys, we got to get this together. Like, just how,
yeah,
that's
early on, actually, in our own journey, we considered ourselves to be what is called median plural, where plural, but without necessarily individual sort of like funny little characters in the TV show Friends of my life. More like the way we described it is sort of like NASA mission control. Like, there's a shit ton of people in there. They're all doing stuff that goes towards the same thing.
I can relate to that. I can relate to that heavy for sure.
Points at you, plural.
Diagnose.
I diagnose. Gavel down.
Yeah, well, we can get into it. We'll get into that in a second, but
yeah, I don't think I'm trying really. I talk to myself in the third person of like Maddie, like I'm talking to myself as a singular person. But I do have I don't know if this is relevant, but does anybody else, if you read too much, especially a specific author, does your self like talk become the book?
Absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
That's a thing. I think that's a pretty normal thing. But Yeah, I think I talk to myself as if I'm included, like if it's negative self-talk, it's like fuck you, right? It's like go
Really?
fuck yourself. Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting to talk about.
It's always fascinated me the different ways that people like talk to themselves and think of themselves, because like when it's just, and maybe some of this also relates to, it's definitely the like plural but don't want to say it yet thing, but also the like not feeling like a human autism thing of like I would never think of like addressing myself in like the way that any other person would see me or talk to me, you know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah, absolutely.
that's just the work sona, you know, or like that's the
Oh god, yeah.
whether I'm at work or not, you know, like none of this is
I had a
that.
thing. I was at it was a kink thing, but a community event, and the organizer was like pointing out stuff people were doing and pointed to me and said, and this person over here. And I actually interrupted them and just automatically without thinking went, oh, I'm not a person. And yeah, and meant it. Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff there as well. I also wanted to say, just over to the side, we've kind of left this realm of things, but that fucking movie Inside Out from Pixar points at that plural kind of.
Shit! I never thought. Is that the like Mulan of being plural?
Not really. It's. I would describe that as more kind of what median plurality kind of is like. And for some, myself included, yeah, medium plurality is kind of a transitionary period before kind of sorting things out.
So tell me about what that means, because so basically what you're talking about with median plurality is that like there isn't individual, like there's not like you were talking about having different fronts, right? So like Callisto generally, like you were saying, Callisto is generally in front and in charge, but there are other characters hovering in the wings that could and have taken charge.
Pretty much with a quick Google search, the definition here that we definitely agree with is that a medium system or medium plurality is a system where members are not as distinct or separate from each other.
Interesting.
This is what Homeworld thinks of fusion. To draw another Steven Universe reference.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That framework makes a lot of sense to me and is less scary to me, because we'll get into this, that like a lot of plurality stuff is like very appealing to me, and I'm also scared of it just because of.
Devin, we'll talk.
I'd love to.
I'm gonna get my crowbar. I'm gonna split your ass in multiple parts, my dude.
That's the thing. I'm not sure if I want to split. So okay, we'll go into it right now. So,
yeah, I want to hear.
All right, we'll do it. We'll do it live on stream. Fine.
Yeah,
because you posted about this a little bit, and I'm very curious. I'm very interested in your feeling about it.
This has come up sometimes also in the context of talking about the integration piece of unmasking autism, that there's this idea of like, you know, integrating more with your unmasked self, or like integrating your various identities and roles that you play so you feel less like fractured and fake and stuff like that. And one criticism that I've gotten of that in the book is that that doesn't necessarily apply to systems. Like you don't want to force this like unity or this cohesiveness, and like and sometimes people have like recommended internal family systems therapy, which is more about thinking about different parts of yourself. Like, this is the part of me that's trying to protect me from being abandoned. This is the part of me that's, you know, trying to do this. And some of that stuff is like very scary to me. And it's because of like,
I was just going to say, I was trying to remember what that was called, because my therapist does that. That is very much the way that my therapist talks to me about it. And it's interesting because I don't, it's like, I think it can be useful for me to, in like a lot, for the basic thing is like, we'll talk about like little Maddie and like, you know, being in trauma Maddie. And it's interesting because that's the way she like talks about it, but it doesn't, it's hard for me to picture myself that way. So it's interesting, but yeah, I interrupted. Go on.
Yeah, no, I think it kind of, some people really vibe with IFS, and I think some people it's just not, they don't. And it's, you know, that's true of a lot of modalities. I don't think it's you know, good or bad. But it doesn't. It certainly isn't. Doesn't quite click in for me. But like, you know, there are definitely like. I feel like as a kid, I definitely had some kind of headmate kind of situation. Certainly, like having conversations with different like characters that I made up that would kind of like help me figure out situations or just like feel less lonely and things like that, which I'm sure a lot of people, you know, have some experience of that as kids. But
yeah, I mean, arguably, imaginary friends are vaguely Tulpa adjacent in that kind of way, and I guess the big difference is sort of doing it from a place of intention and linking it in with this understanding and this framework. I'm going to step out for like 2 seconds to take a bio break. I will literally be 2 seconds. My toilet is 3 feet from me. I love living in a tiny apartment.
You're good.
Okay,
Devin,
great.
do you need a bio break, Devin? Should we go to hold for a second?
I'm good, but if you want to, I can just chill.
No,
you know.
I'm good. I was just checking.
Okay, we'll just do a little ASMR. A little ASMR over here. Just gonna piss on the mic.
Don't say that. People will want it. Don't.
We will have the stream taken down. And May Valence, we'll get into why it's scary in a second here when Callisto comes back.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, great. So, you know, I think, and I've also heard people talk about kind of using, similar to the way that a lot of kids use the, like imaginary friends, tulpas or whatever, as like, as a coping mechanism as autistic adults to feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this public space. There's someone holding my hand and I'm kind of talking with them in my brain about like what we're going to do, what's going on,
100%.
and things feeling less intimidating. And all of that is stuff that I really resonate with and do. And like when I'm trying to get myself together to like do something, it is definitely like, okay, everyone, like, let's like, it does feel like this, you know, there's multiple people in the hull and who knows what they're fucking around with, but okay, it's time to like be serious, y'all. But the reason why I'm like scared to like pull these threads apart is because I fucked up my brain with hypnosis before, where I had this, you know, so I've been a hypno fetishist since I had a consciousness to think about fucking with. But as an adult, started kind of really latching on to, for a while, like a robotification thing. That was for a while, like the form of like hypnosis, like erotic play that was like very, very cool to me. I was making, you know, files that were like using a roboticized voice of myself to like kind of drill that home. And for a while I had this like pretty serious like relationship with someone that was like a, you know, dom sub robotification relationship. It had always been his dream to like have someone converted into like his robotic servant. And so we're like, great, let's like play with that together or whatever. And so it kind of developed out more from just having, you know, play hypno sessions where I'm like going into this robot mode for like an hour or two to like I'm having these mantras that I'm like listening to like all of the time. I'm pretty good at going into like a like waking trance kind of state where you can function but you're kind of feeling a little wonky and altered. And so we really tried to like, because it was hot and cool, that I was starting to become more and more capable of these things. We were really kind of pushing it to the largest extent that we could. And I wanted to, you know, like, let's see how long I can remain in a trance, in this like robot like state with these like mantras running in the back of my head while I'm doing everything, like while I'm at work, while I'm showering. I started like dreaming the mantras and stuff like that. And you know, when you're a robot, you're not supposed to have feelings, right? So that was not good. I was doing a lot of emotional suppression stuff, and there was probably a lot of reasons why that kind of being an unfeeling robot was appealing to me in the first place. That was related to a lot of emotional repression stuff, but a combination of that, just like not really dealing with my feelings.
Can I ask, was this before you knew you were trans?
This was after.
Okay.
I had some experiences with like hypno stuff that actually helped me realize I was trans, because somebody was trying to have me be like a bimbo, and I was like, I had like a real fucking, it really freaked me out. So that was like really when I realized that I had to like do something about the trans thing, was when I was in 2016, when I was first kind of getting involved in hypno play with other people. So
Yeah.
like, so that's related, but like definitely had problems with repressing my emotions and feelings and needs in general. May have written a few books about it.
Yeah, none of us are surprised about that.
Yeah,
We're
not to make you get into it.
Yeah, but so it went to this like, and I still like thinking about that time period of a couple of months where I was doing this stuff really, really hardcore. Like it was fucking hot, but it was like the edgiest of edge play, where like I was really thinking of myself in with like only like its pronouns, which is fine, but then also like the name that I had for that robot, like Sona, was like how I was thinking of myself. Like I was like only like coming up like right before my like therapy sessions, and otherwise I was like in that like I was activated the whole time, and it was like the closest thing to like a psychotic break that I've had. It was not good.
Right.
And so that is why it's just because of my own tendency to sometimes go down, and I'm only using this language for myself, like I can just really go down deep into certain kinds of pits of thought, and sometimes kind of delude myself about things if I go too far with it in ways that have not been healthy for me. And so I'm just afraid to do that again, basically. Even while feeling a lot of resonance with a lot of like plurality stuff and how people describe it, and even with seeing a lot of commonalities between things like, I don't know, when pet players talk about like pup space, or subspace, or like headspaces that you can pop in and out of, and it's just a fun thing that you do, and it's not, you know, the serious life engulfing fucking
Yeah.
identity
Right.
erasure shit.
And
You know?
I guess sort of it comes down to whether or not, because in the end, it's all about like the language you use to describe a subjective experience. I mean, theoretically, I could sort of live a life where I don't describe myself as or identify as plural, and sort of just have this as aspects of myself. And I think that's also just kind of a question to answer for yourself and to sort of process out. And I totally get where you're coming from with like being worried about going down those kind of rabbit holes when it comes to linking it with kink and with other kind of things with hypnosis. There's actually, in my own experience, part of sort of where Agnes developed from is some of that same kind of, because we share that love for fucking weird robot shit. Agnes kind of developed in part from some of the levers of executive function linked to some of that kind of programming. But we have sort of made the explicit choice to distance that so that it's not like, I do not have like, say, an explicit like robot or sort of like drone headmate or specifically we have tried to avoid making intentionally like producing whether a tulpa or a headspace or a state that is explicitly a kink thing, because that can go down some places that are not necessarily cool or healthy to go down for me in particular.
Yeah, and that reminds me also of like the whole Bambi sleep thing, because we've talked
Oh
about
Jesus!
that.
That's to preface this. We have friends who have like actively broken people out of that. That's to an extent a cult. That is, and we have friends and mutual friends who have been really, really hurt by that stuff by going a little too far into it.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, that is a set of like hypno audio files that are about like force creating an alter, and having that alter be like take control and like not be able to like front anymore as yourself, and like losing time, not remembering things. Like those are like built into the original files, and there's like, and there being like no warning what's on the files and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's
and being
generally
and all of these things.
Yeah, disclaimer with any hypnosis stuff is if it doesn't have warnings of what is in the file, that's a red flag.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's, I think, you know, and you've mentioned to me before, like staying way clear of those things, those files for good reason. Like it seems like that is probably a good rule of thumb for a lot of people. Not maybe not for everyone, but I think especially if you're into like any kind of like hypno hardcore headspace stuff, blending plural identities with kink too one-to-one could be a little
It's definite edge play.
tough. Yeah, it's edge play. Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting. I definitely don't have any like I don't know. It's not something that I any of my identities like have that danger. So it's definitely like a kind of danger that I'm completely unfamiliar with. I think that the only similarity I thing that I can think of is like like my first exposure to trans people and was through porn.
Same.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people. And so I think that is like a thing, and I think that that's for like trans people and like understanding that you're trans. There's definitely a like I don't know. That is a like aspect of understanding that you're trans for a lot of people is like I don't know, worrying that it is a fetish or
Absolutely.
trying to figure out your gender outside of your sexuality, because it makes a lot of sense that you're
and honestly, I've written about this. I personally started with that, like, oh, it's just a fetish. I'm just some weirdo who's into this in a sexual freak kind of way. And then sort of hard rejected that and went, no, it's absolutely not a fetish. I'm not into these things. I'm disgusted by them and the people who do them. I am trans separate from that. And there are, it feels like, particularly in kind of, we're going to get spicy here, cancellation incoming. I do feel like there are some circles, it's particularly trans femme heavy circles, that do kind of get stuck at that stage or sort of one stage past it where they're just like, oh, I'm absolutely not. I disown any connection to that.
I'm HSTS and you're an you're AGP and you're a fetishist and that's why you're ugly and I'm hot and
basically, yeah. And I've kind of circled back around sort of going like, hey, this was an integral part of my understanding of it. And as an adult, what's fucking wrong with me sexualizing myself or getting excited about certain things or fucking around with gender?
Yeah, I mean everybody is. I mean it's. I mean yeah. Just to derail into the specifics of that kind of stuff, it's like like every like. Are you telling me putting on lingerie and getting horny and by the fact that you're a sexy woman is not a normal woman thing? Like that is like so fucking normal, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about autogynephilia. That's what that is. It's like I'm literally getting horny because my gender is being like, you know, because my gender is being like I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like validated.
Yeah, it's like euphoric, affirmed. Yeah.
Right. And men do the same fucking thing. Are you so right. But and my point is I guess that is the closest thing that for an identity that I have. And I don't know if there's any point of comparison in the like the line between kink and plurality and where that line is, and it's interesting thinking about that line, there being like a danger in like letting the kink.
I think it's very headspacey more than it is even kink, because I think because sex itself isn't actually, despite all of our like puritanical programming, right? Like it's not dark, there's nothing evil about it, right? And so like feeling like affirmed and connected in your sexuality to who you are in some important way, like even let's say somebody who's plural or therian in like a very spiritual way, like having your spirituality and your sexuality linked, like that seems like a very beautiful thing, for example,
and
like,
super normal throughout history.
I really want to shout out Vitriolic in the chat saying, I think we need more people transitioning for sex reasons. Like fuck it, it's not a big deal.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Hell
that
yeah.
is
and And I will also say in response to It's for R with I always assume that hypno is a thing that could be abused, but it's scary to hear about how that actually happens. It absolutely does happen, but also at the same time, that is not like that is very much also something that has been used to like fearmonger about hypnosis. It's the reason it's like banned on a lot of porn sites is these completely like total satanic panic fears that like they're gonna hypnotize people to give them money or whatever the fuck, and like
Sissy
it's
hypno,
very much
sissy hypno is
God,
real.
the things that Republicans say about sissy hypno is so funny to me, and it implies to me that like Jordan B. Peterson and people like that have like watched it and been like, "Oh, this is terrible. We have to stop this."
Who's the cult guy?
Cult expert, Stephen Hassan, cult expert. He was like, who's still brought up and cited in a lot of documentaries and things as like an expert on cult tactics. He's just totally like a charlatan. But yeah, he has that one tweet where it's like, I couldn't even watch, 5 minutes of a sissy hypno video. Its pull on me was too strong. This is dark stuff, and it's like, I don't want to.
Wonder what that says about you, guy.
Right? Yeah.
Maybe you need a few more sissy hypno porn videos.
And I don't want to like paint all of this stuff because of my own experiences with too dark or serious of a brush, because I think part of the appeal of like, for example, sissy hypno for a lot of people, like a lot of kink stuff, is you're not having to in that moment own the agency of wanting what you want, because there's a lot of shame tied up in that thing. So wouldn't it be nice if someone was forcing you, or circumstances just pushed you to do this thing that you actually want, and you didn't have to worry about being judged for wanting it? And that's cool, I think it's when you get into like themes of like identity erasure, memory loss, that kind of stuff, which is stuff I was very explicitly like playing with, and some of these more dangerous files play with. That's when you have bad shit happen. But there's like hypno that's just like, oh, you just feel really good and loved and safe, and then you jizz, like.
Sorry, just the phrasing there. Oh, geez. There was kind of a voice crack in that. Jeez. And then you jizz, and that's life.
Oh man.
God.
But yeah, I wonder if it's interesting, and I'm glad you shared your fears around it, and I wonder if it's like a thing of like, it's just not like, it definitely feels like a thing being plural for a lot of people is a thing you could lean into for sure. Callisto, like you were saying, this is something that you like could not live your life doing that. It's like,
and like it's not even like in a sense of like, oh, take the blue pill and repress it. It's like it's a situation of like, do you want to go down that road? Do you want to identify that way? And if you don't, then fuck it.
Yeah. Is it a helpful thing for you?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of also the same way I think about like labels and identity labels, because shit's all made up. So like, if you want to use, let's say, X micro label, whatever, if that's cool for you and that's something that is helpful and makes your life better, then fuck yeah. And if it's not and you don't want to do it, then nobody's going to force you at gunpoint to be plural. I joked about a crowbar earlier, but I'm not.
Well, I do. I think I also had, though, a lot of misconceptions too about the extent of what plurality looks like and all the different ways it can look. So this idea of like, is it medium or medial?
Median, like the median in the middle of a highway, like that kind of name.
So this idea of like median plurality is a lot less threatening to me to think of than like, oh, this person's in the front, they're fighting for dominance. That very Bambi sleep fucking, split.
Yeah, and even then, like, there's, with myself as well, there's really not a lot of that I personally experience in how I experience my system. Void being very much the exception to that, and that is rare. That is like, it's happened once in the span of 2-ish years that I've been plural.
Yeah, I think I'm cool with like having all of the kittens in the box, or like, the philosophers on the stairs. We can have the
multi-track
philosophers
drifting. Yeah.
come together, and the philosophers can have a little debate, but they're ultimately all working towards, you know,
the
they all
council will
want the
decide
best.
your fate.
Yeah, I think that is kind of actually maybe how that's a useful way to understand how certain things.
Yeah, and I mean, fucking, who's to say that that's not kind of, in a way, how the human brain works? We're a big thing of meat made up of different parts that communicate with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like the self is like, the idea of there being a singular self is itself already like a fiction that's like created by language and because of how consciousness works and because of how having a body works. But we actually are all these disparate parts, and that's why we can have so many different competing inclinations and personality traits that are more apparent in certain situations but not in others. And like what I found so appealing about the integration thing in that I talk about in Unmasking Autism, that integration process, is this idea of like all of these different sides, even if sometimes they want competing things or have competing tendencies, they can still all make sense together.
Yeah.
And I think this is another way of doing that, actually.
Fucking forming Voltron.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Does that vibe with how you experience things, Callisto, as being like
sort of? Less so now, but like to an extent. I mean, I'm also an exception to the rule in that, again, only 3 of us pretty firmly and solidly set as so. And like more systems that we know have upwards of 4, in the realm of maybe like 5 or 6 sometimes, and exponentially more from there. There's various, I mean, we don't really know in terms of like what the average number of headmates is or whatever.
Right.
But essentially for us, really, it's kind of at best a communication between myself and Agnes.
Mm-hmm. What this is a thing that I'm curious on a basic level. What is being a system feel like is the wrong term? Like we were talking about when, like, I'm trying to put my thoughts into words. Does it, when you're like, we were talking about what it feel like, how we address ourselves, like I was saying, it's always like from a third person, like I'm talking to Maddie, and Devin was saying sometimes it's like we. And so is it like, is it like there is a person you are experiencing being with other people there? Is that sort of the vibe?
Sort of, yes. And that is also, for me in particular, I, Callisto, do not really have times where I am explicitly not fronting 100% and I am out of the equation. I can sort of be in the background, but I'm always there.
Okay.
To quote the great philosopher Sam Reich, I've been here the whole time.
Right. Okay.
And just, yeah, like for me in particular, I'm more or less always there. Agnes is oftentimes there, but usually in the background. Void is an occasional member of that.
So if someone, if
and
Void...
also to sort of jump into like, for example, talking to oneself, I don't really talk to myself explicitly. It's more talking between headmates, or sort of talking more myself to the system at large, myself included.
Okay, yeah, that I think that was what I was curious about, and what it seemed like it was, but yeah, that makes sense. It seems like a helpful way to, I don't know, have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking about how, I don't know, just some of my negative self-talk and how, I don't know, brutal it can be at times, and how that could be helpful to have like like you were talking about a protector as a kind of headmate or altar that people have, and I can absolutely understand how that could be helpful.
And that might be from more of like for me with Agnes, it's very much like sort of a sensory overwhelm type thing. Like if I'm running low on social spoons, it'll be Agnes will be the one prioritizing. All right, let's get us home. But that can also be, and we know systems where protectors are like aggressive and like mean and angry as an expression of emotions that they themselves don't necessarily really feel comfortable expressing.
Right.
So Maddie, some of what you're talking about with negative self-talk stuff, like lots of different therapeutic techniques are like about like imagining that that's not you saying that, but like putting that on someone else, somebody like, you know, a parent who used to say that or whatever. Like, is that something that you've used? Has it worked? Has it not? Like,
not really. I probably it's one of those things. I'm sure it would be helpful for me to be using explicit tools like that to help with that kind of stuff. But I don't know if I've experimented with those kinds of tools. It definitely does help to remember, especially particular negative self-talk. I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a thing that my dad said. Like that's explicitly a thing my dad said. I have a memory when he said it. Like, so that's definitely helpful. But yeah, that makes sense as like as a aspect of this for sure. And that's the thing that I was talking about in my therapy that we do, that is kind of related to this stuff, because my therapist uses, you know, internal family systems type stuff where, you know, she's frequently like, you know, when I'm having negative self-talk in therapy, she's like, well, how old are you right now? You know, that kind of stuff. Like, and like, and yeah, it's interesting because it's very, it's something that I do find helpful, but it's in such like I'm unable to really feel it. Like I think it's helpful in like an intellectual, and I'm somebody that over intellectualizes, like that's my thing. But I do, so I find it helpful, but it's not something I've ever been able to like really feel. But I can, but in that being removed from it, in that like I can understand how it would feel to like, you know, conceptualize things that way and feel that way, feel those things those ways. It makes a lot of sense to me, even if it's not something that I feel personally.
Yeah, and I would say in therapy, over intellectualizing gets a bad rep. Like, I think sometimes there are ways to do these things that aren't literally like, oh, I'm imagining myself as a child hearing these things. Like, sometimes it is more like, again, kind of like the philosophers having a conversation where it's like, or fucking Ace Attorney, where it's like, okay, now where did we get that data from? Okay, that doesn't make any sense. We can actually disregard that. Like, it
right.
You know, there's the sensitive bubble bath, touchy feely way to do it, and then there's the way that's maybe feels a little bit more cold and analytical. And I think some of us are just like, you know, if that's how we work, regardless of whether it's due to trauma or not, like if it works, it works.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely want to get if anybody has any questions, definitely want to get those in at the end here.
Blush Tiger said in the chat, as my trans mask egg was cracking, I would notice I would sometimes snap into a girl mode personality and how it felt like a front. Still feels like it's its own part of me though, and especially lately with the latest changes from T has reconfused my concept of gender all over again. Yeah, this is super interesting because it's like masking, being closeted, having a Sona.
Is masking, is a work Sona not a non-consensual tulpa you've had to build? Fucking, I don't know. It's definitely adjacent. All of us are plural under capitalism. This says a lot about society.
Literally, though.
We've been forced to be. Oh, mansies.
to be our worst
I'm just
trauma.
imagining like the fucking gif of Tom from Tom and Jerry. He's frantically placing down the train tracks in front of the train. That's building a work Sona.
Yes. Thank you for the follow, Night Thunder. Yeah, no, there's like, it's hard to tease these layers apart, and like, I think especially when like one's transition to progresses, it can be a little bit like, well, wait, now there are these things that I distanced myself from for a while that I needed to as part of my transition, but now I'm far away enough from having to be that girl in this case where it's like,
Yeah.
I can look back and pick up the parts that I do actually like.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of coming back around to it and reconciling with it. I've heard like descriptions by some people who are trans in plural of like feeling like them pre-transition was like a headmate who is now gone or dead.
That's
which is interesting.
Do you feel that way at all about like
no
that doesn't vibe at all?
Yeah, not really.
That's an interesting way to think about it though.
Yeah. Well, some people, they really feel like the person that they were before they transitioned, they don't feel a continuity there. They feel really dissociated from the person and like don't even remember things very well from that time.
Yeah. I mean, I admittedly don't, but that's largely trauma.
Yeah.
I guess the question becomes, am I sort of traumagenic because of the traumatizing experience of growing up transgender? And Devin, when I saw you use that intentional misspelling in a post, I had to like lay down. It was so funny to me.
I use it all the time now. Now, if I type transgender right, I'll go back and put transgender.
You just need to change your like phone and computer's autocorrect for transgender to be wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, but for me, like, I guess the traumatizing experience of growing up as undiagnosed autistic and as yet undiscovered transgender.
It's really traumatizing. I think that it's something that is easy to forget because it's easy to downplay our own fucking traumas. But like, yeah, what trangs? TRANGS? Is that what you? I think that's what you put. Trangs.
It's you just
Transgender. Yeah, you got the.
you just switch the S and the G. You just typo it.
Yeah. I know a lot of our community is trans or gendery, and that shit is fucking hard enough, man. Like, give yourself some fucking space for that shit. I have, you know, other traumas, and it's still a real part of it, you know.
Oh yeah, it's huge. Transpeak said in the chat, a friend in therapy has also been working on talking to her boy self and thanking him for protecting her girl self while she was in the closet. I'm gonna cry. That's so sweet.
Yeah, that's real. It's my therapist talks a lot about like, I don't know if this is a thing that we talk about in a personification way necessarily in my therapy, but it's definitely like remembering that coping strategies are like, your negative coping strategies are there for a fucking reason. And they kept you, and especially like if you know you had traumatic shit, they kept you alive, and that's why they're there and don't want to go away, because they kept you alive for a long time. And now maybe they're negative, but it's like that shit is there for a reason.
Yeah definitely.
So Callisto,
you
gotta put a doll.
Oh yes, I sure do.
It's been a while. It's been a minute since we've been in the dollhouse.
I love it. I kind of want to do, like, if there's space for him looming over something, Ringo in that image, in that Thomas image, but like cut out so he's like hands over like a couch or something.
These are all his dolls.
Oh, good point. Yeah, we could put Ringo and the cast of Thomas.
Get you in the discussion here. All right,
yes.
let's see what I can do quickly.
Oh geez, that's me.
Let's see what we can do.
There you go.
Oh, here, let's get that pesky background out of there.
Or you could have like the door open in the back behind debate guy with Ringo's giant face just looming.
Just an eyeball.
Need the train pride flag on the basement wall.
Oh my god, yes. The RuPaul Googling train. How could she have not known? That's crazy to me.
What? Oh, the trans. Oh yeah, RuPaul having the trains pride
the
flag
trans
instead
pride
of the trans pride flag when she was called out for being transphobic for having
A
the
no cosmetic surgery rule for a while, or like hormones or performance enhancing drug.
Oh my god. Well, there was a bunch of shit. She had like a segment with the word shemale in it, like female or shemale. Just there's a
shemale, yep.
Yeah, there's a lot.
She's done it all.
All right, let's see. This website is pretty good. I'm really surprised. Oh well.
Oh, they did a good job.
His arm's a little cut off, but he. I mean, I could try and let me see if I can
always do
Photoshop
it manually.
Speed run this.
I can always do that manually later too. Let's see.
There is a restore on there too, so anything that.
Oh, his arm isn't weirdly cut off. His sleeve is just weirdly rankly.
Yeah. Okay, this is pretty good for now. We can remaster that later.
Yeah, Ringo remastered.
Ringo remastered.
Thank God for remove.bg.
Nothing but respect for our troops at remove.bg.
It's right up there with time.is for useful websites. There he is.
Where can you? I mean, that works pretty good. He's just kind of behind, weirdly
just
behind.
Yeah.
Where's his legs? Who knows? Who cares?
Oh. Wow.
I think he's perfect. I think he is truly perfect.
This really gets more unhinged every time.
We need to do more with this. I love it so much. I need to put some time into it. I think we need to do our tournament.
Yeah, we got a lot of dolls at this point.
Yep. We have a lot going on there. Now there's Ringo.
There he is.
He is. He's presenting the
tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is British.
He is British.
Welcome to my dollhouse.
Hello, it's me, Ringo Starr. Welcome to the dollhouse.
Have some tea.
Peace and love on planet Earth.
That's too good. You're too good at that.
It's really good.
I am a voice actor.
Clearly.
Yes, you've honed your instrument so well.
All right, so we're getting close to the end here. Again, if you are so monetarily endowed and inclined, there's a Ko-Fi. Link is right there. Subscribe to Callisto's Twitch for if and when they are able to do that time and voice wise. Yeah. Do you have anything? Do you want to plug a Tumblr or anything else, Callisto? Any other comments?
That is a good question. I guess thanks for having me on. Thanks for listening to me rant about trains and gender and identity. And yeah, I guess I don't really have anything in particular to plug, but I'll be around. You know where to find me. I'll be confined back to my little box.
Yeah.
Yes,
back with the trolls.
Throw it back. No, this was so nice and informative. First of all, we've corrected the misinformation about Thomas,
Very
and
important.
being fast jacketed by a liberal child trafficker Gia Tolentino. So that's important.
By the woke
And
moralists. That's
by the
what
woke-
I.
by the woke moralists. And this was also just a really informative, helpful
It was.
discussion.
I feel really bad because it was a sharticle, and we didn't do the
shit.
shart.
Oh, true. We didn't even do the goof.
Yeah, we didn't do the
Oh my
guy.
God.
So
Shart. We cleaned up that shart. We picked up that poop today.
So we did a
your help.
sharticle and a piss course.
Yes.
We had several in there.
Definitely. Let's see if we have anybody to raid.
Ooh, let's see if we can find any plural streamers.
Oh, that's good. I wonder what's the tag? What's the
There, I don't know if there is a Twitch tag because, like, I know disabled streamers had to really fight for one.
Well, I think you can tag whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are probably other ways to tag that are more
Yeah.
specific.
I just
but
wanted
you can, yeah, we could just try.
Yeah. There's a few people who one of their tags is plural right now who are streaming. And one of them, you know what? They're all furries. all three of them are PNG tubers. Let's see, we have Enos
Well,
Realm.
I'm one to talk.
Yeah.
There's Enos Realm who's playing Kingdom Hearts. Cozy Skeleton playing Dead by Daylight, and the Devil's Kitten playing Resident Evil 4.
There's actually
They're
more.
all-
If you there's a lot.
There's more?
Yeah, I got the same thing and then I did more.
Oh,
let's
yeah.
do one with there's one with 5 viewers who has system in their name, so I feel like it's a
Yeah, and they have plural system as a tag. They're doing Dragon's Dogma.
yep.
Cool.
Sugar cookie system. Go say hello for us to them. Nope. Let me copy that. There we go. Put that in the raid thing. There we go. Yes. Say hello
Okay.
for us.
Yeah, we might scare them a little bit.
Be nice. I
Yeah,
have
be
I
nice.
feel I love this